Well, if there's one thing about Kingdom Hearts that has definitely made it resonate with the populace, it has to be the characters. Whether it be Memorize-It flavored Axel or Liquid Diabetes flavored Sora, there's always been a veritable cornucopia of well-constructed characters for fans to fall in love with, or just despise in the last 23-year journey. And then there's Kairi. Now, I don't really have to go into detail or even help anyone understand the fact that Kairi is probably one of the more, controversial characters. And unfortunately for us, this is not due to her actions, backstory, or her overall characterization. No, in fact, it's the lack of characterization that creates conflict for the character. Let's be honest, people. Divorced from personal opinion, Kairi is objectively a bit of a mess from a writing standpoint. I mean, you saw the montage. Finding a forum proclaiming her one of the biggest letdowns of the franchise is easy to find. It's gotten so bad that one, such as myself, has to ask themselves, where does Kairi even go from here? And, better yet, does Kairi even need to be in the story any further? It sounds like a crazy question, right? After all, she is part of the Destiny trio with Riku and Sora. She's a Princess of Heart, one of the 7 Guardians of Light. But let's be real. I've just listed 3 major titles, and yet, at the end of the day, they feel like just titles. Titles that offer little substance to her character the more I think about those titles. Now, it wouldn't be surprising to encounter a slew of fans who'd say, yes, Kairi certainly should remain a triagonist. She's gotten better and better, especially since she started training, and she's gonna be great in the next game, Dream Drop Distance.
No, brother. I have seen this before.
I mean Kingdom Hearts 4.
Ooh, boy.
And that, my friends, is only a fraction of the issues with this character, whether you're looking in-universe or in the meta. So, join me on this journey as we exhume the corpse that is Kairi and pose a pretty fun question. Through the lens of good character writing, is Kairi a good character, and, by extension, can she see improved characterization in future installments? This is Character Autopsy. Now, the initial purpose of this monster essay is to ascertain whether Kairi will work in the next games, but before we can get there, we'll have to decide whether she was any good to begin with from a more subjective perspective. We'll discuss this in greater detail later, but to discuss the objective merit of her characterization, well, that would require limiting my critique to authorial intent. That means judging Kairi entirely through the lens of what Nomura and his writing team wanted from her character. And, that's a little bit limiting to me. So, again, I'll explain all of this later. Just trust me on this one. See, the case I'm making, fueled by Cranberry Sprite, will account for the author's vision, but will acknowledge all audience interpretation, and as such, can't truly be objective. So, yeah, now that we've got all the pedantic shit out of the way, let's get to being a judgmental little bit. So, is Kairi a well-written character? Do the decisions made by the writing team do her justice? To judge these writing decisions, I thought it best to ask myself, what constitutes good characterization? Obviously, opinions may vary, but I've managed to narrow down the criteria to 4 important components: realism, conflict, strengths and flaws, and individuality. So, of course, we're starting this with Chapter 1, realism. There's a lot of ways a character is defined as real in media. Some say it's personality, others claim relatability. For the sake of this conversation, let's define character realism as an amalgamation of traits that evoke familiarity in the audience. This familiarity allows a character to feel real, as the audience feels like the character has lived and experienced life in a recognizable fashion. Okay, so again, a bit of a fucking mouthful, but be prepared, it only gets worse from here on out, so just join me on this journey, friends! It's not a stretch to say that a character will register as real when you can watch a character's story and say, yeah, that makes sense. I may or may not do the same thing in their position, but I can get living that way. So, let's take a look at Kairi's story. The life Kairi has lived. Her story begins in Birth by Sleep, specifically Radiant Garden. While living with her grandmother, Kairi is attacked by a group of Unversed. While fleeing, she runs into Aqua, who protects her from the Unversed. When Kairi hides behind Aqua, she grabs hold of the Keyblade's crossguard, not realizing at the time this action would invoke the Keyblade inheritance ceremony and mark Kairi as a Keyblade wielder. Now see, we've already got a bit of an issue, one that I think most people familiar with the story will have already noticed. See, one of the more interesting reveals in Birth by Sleep was the inheritance ceremony. Seeing how our favorite characters were destined to become heroes was, pretty neat to see. However, the inheritance ceremony is only one part of the scene, only one part of what makes the reveal of how one becomes a Keyblade wielder so special. The second part, and debatably more important part, is the action that subtly validates the wielder's right to be a Keyblade wielder. A little something that is done pretty masterfully with 2/3 of the Destiny trio. Let's use the young cinnamon roll himself as an example. Sora is an interesting case, as the inheritance ceremony is not invoked for him out of fear of inevitable conflict with Riku. No, our main boy wasn't even supposed to be the chosen one for the Kingdom Key, and yet he is. Now, any aspiring lore keeper would raise an eyebrow. I know I did, but Birth by Sleep clears it up pretty well and validates his claim to the Keyblade. How? By showing his strength of heart and his desire to protect his best friend. The first is shown through the conversation with Aqua, where he expresses his desire to always be connected to his best friend and protect him. Aqua acknowledges this and gives the boy some pretty sound advice about always helping Riku stay on the straight and narrow.
Eventually...
Let Riku go!
Riku's here?
Riku, where are you?
Riku!
Oh, my sweet summer child, the things you'll go through for love. The second is shown by him opening the Sora Heart Hotel, trademark pending, to a young stranger named Ventus. The scenes show us that maybe it's not just the act of invoking the inheritance ceremony that's important to having a character become a Keyblade wielder. Nah, it's possibly equally, if not more important, for people to show their strength of heart. And hey, best boy over here is no slouch either. While he received the official Keyblade inheritance, Riku had to prove himself to Terra by sharing his motivation in life, to protect what matters most in life. Because the power of friendship cannot be denied.
No, wait! We'll use the power of friendship. Oh, yo! That pinch is crazy! See, this is why I love you.
By doing this, and seeing himself in the young boy, Terra thinks he's worthy of the Keyblade inheritance ceremony and actually performed the rite. It's a damn good moment on its own. Hell, it doubles as a great moment in solid foreshadowing as, this is a pretty defining moment in Riku's overall narrative, as the boy will continue to struggle with his worth and self-respect after a moment of weakness. Not super relevant to the conversation, but hey, again, interesting to note, yeah? And then there's Kairi. Kairi becomes worthy of a Keyblade through one simple action: grabbing the hilt of Aqua's blade. Okay, so she becomes a Keyblade wielder by complete chance. This is not helped by the fact that Kairi doesn't even receive a metaphoric scene to showcase the strength of her character or her resolve like Sora and Riku do. The only other significant scene with her is her offering Aqua flowers for saving her, a scene which has little characterization other than Kairi being a nice kid. The writers forgo a perfect moment for characterization and plot progression, and as a result, there's a hollowness to her eventual transition into a Keyblade wielder. So, we're already off to a great start. Her story continues with her displacement from Radiant Garden that's explored in Melody of Memories. According to Kairi's memories, Xehanort is responsible for the darkness that engulfed Radiant Garden and propelled Kairi to Destiny Island. He suspected that Kairi was a princess of heart, and as a result, her heart would seek out a strong Keyblade wielder's heart and take refuge there. Xehanort warns her of the possibility of this whole thing falling apart and failing, and her being stuck in what we can assume as of now is Quadratum? I could be wrong on this one, so take that one a little bit with a grain of salt. If that ends up being the situation, her being stuck in Quadratum, she's advised to abandon ship. Luckily for Kairi, the experiment worked and her heart found Riku on Destiny Island. Her memories were repressed, and that is where her story begins in Kingdom Hearts 1.
Pause.
And once again, we are presented with another issue with Kairi's characterization. A fundamental issue that permeates her character throughout the series. See, this displacement, this major event that sets the trajectory of her entire life, shows a baffling lack of agency or autonomy on Kairi's part. See, from this memory, we are told that what has happened to Kairi and defined her life from, being forced from her home with her life at risk to the very actions that would make her a Keyblade wielder that can protect and perhaps redeem the world from darkness. Well, this is all just Xehanort's grand old plan, and not a single hint of that plan has anything to do with Kairi and her own free will. Look, I get it, Kairi's young, but as I've already shown, Riku and Sora, despite their age, had input in their eventual fates in this story, or at the bare minimum have voiced interests and desires, likes and dislikes that influence the narrative of whether or not they became Keyblade wielders, and what struggles may come to that. Honestly, this actually presents yet another consistent issue with Kairi and gets at the core of her terrible relationship with character realism. She is an accessory to the story of other, better developed characters. She's not a main contributor or force in her own story, her own narrative. The entirety of this situation exists to show Xehanort's will and backstory. And guess what that does? Well, I'll tell you what it doesn't do. It doesn't show the life Kairi lived as a young girl. It doesn't show her thoughts or emotions about being used for someone else's gain. It doesn't show her acting in support or against Xehanort's will. Even in her memories, Kairi fails to act like a believable human. She has no discernible reaction to Xehanort's revelations, no tears for her fallen world and grandmother, no fear of the unknown, no reaction. I think I need to explain that every action has a reaction, especially for humans. It's almost necessary for any living being. It's relatable in a way. And yet, our red-haired princess offers us nothing of the sort. As a result, there's a disconnect, a tragic lack of an experienced life that is recognizable. Yes, my friends, a disturbing lack of realism. It's a bit of a waste if you ask me. The writers managed to concoct an interesting story for the young girl who was, to be blunt, lacking any real plot importance and squandered it entirely, letting this scene exist solely to wrap up a loose end of Kairi's origins. It's kind of amazing. An origin story that's so bare bones that it fails to do anything beyond exposition. Fan-fucking-tastic. If realism is the spice of a well-constructed narrative, I've got to say conflict is practically the meat, the bulk of an interesting tale, and Kingdom Hearts has been pretty damn good in that department. Yeah, shit gets complicated if you don't play all the games or listen to Just a Pancake. But you gotta admit, it's pretty entertaining to unravel events once you have all the pieces, from the mystery of Ansem and the many Norts to the Keyblade War. It's pretty good shit. I feel like I don't need to say this, but we are here to be overly analytical fuckasses, so let's define conflict. I've got my own definition, but a bitch sounds much smarter when she references someone, and to be honest, I like the definition, so let's get to it. J.T. Bushnell, novelist and literary scholar at OSU, described conflict as such. In a story, we want something to happen, usually something bad. Until it does, we're not very interested. Tension might be the mother of fiction, but problems are the mother of tension. In fiction, those problems are called conflict. More precisely, conflict means thwarted, endangered, or opposing desire. When I really think about it, a good example that comes to mind for me of a piece of media that follows this philosophy to a T, it's gotta be Homestuck. Conflict in Homestuck is never artificial or plot reliant. Conflict occurs when a character's will collides with another, a show of opposing desires that are in danger of being thwarted. You see what I did there? Quality content, I deserve a like for that. Kingdom Hearts may not be 100% conflicts based on conflicting wills and desires, but on a general level, characters face consistent danger that requires action. But what makes these conflicts interesting enough to hold audiences over for over 20 years? Simple. How this conflict of looming danger affects the characters on a personal level, a more internalized conflict, if you will. Now, what's all this got to do with Kairi? Well, let's go ahead and apply some logic. With every bit of tension that these characters experience from the looming danger that is omnipresent in their world, we're introduced to a variety of internal strives that endear them to us and results in us either actively rooting for or against them. We can see this far and wide in characters, from Roxas' struggle for self-identity in Days to Sora's journey to be a hero in the first game. But what of Kairi's story? What of her conflict? Well, let's take a look, shall we? In Kingdom Hearts 1, Kairi's entire role in the story is honestly to be a MacGuffin. I was gonna do this whole breakdown first and then analyze the previous section, but I feel like most of you clicked this video and already know what you're in for, so let's just rip the band-aid right off. For the uninitiated, a MacGuffin is an object, device, or event that is necessary to the plot and the motivation of the characters. But that object, or in this instance, character, is insignificant, unimportant, or irrelevant in of itself. And, boy oh boy does that fit Kairi's role to a T in Kingdom Hearts 1. She's got little significance or importance besides being the damsel in distress. She's a goal for Sora, Riku, and the Rose Gallery over there. Now let's move on to...
No, that's wrong.
But TG, that's a dramatic oversimplification of her role in the story.
No. She's literally on the TV tropes page for this. Alright. I feel a couple of eye rolls and I'll be damned if I let that shit go, so let's dive right in. In Kingdom Hearts 1, Kairi is introduced as the best friend of Sora and Riku. There's not a lot of definition on the dynamic they have with Kairi in particular, but a pretty consistent interpretation that I find a lot of people mention when discussing this is that they kind of compete for her attention, or make it a point to do so. Yeah, that's kind of the best I got in terms of that. Moving on. We're told that Kairi appeared on the shore of the island randomly one day, and her arrival was proof for the boys that there were worlds beyond Destiny Island, which piqued their interest in setting out on an adventure to find more worlds. Now, there's one specific scene I feel really highlights her role as a MacGuffin. Besides the obvious. And that scene is between Sora and Kairi when her amnesia is brought up. When asked by Sora what Kairi remembered about her past life on what we now know to be Radiant Garden, she tells Sora she doesn't remember any of that before the conversation progresses. To reiterate, Kairi is confronted by one of her friends about the fact that she was displaced at an early age and pretty much has no tangible reaction beyond the objective. So let's say that again. A young girl is asked about something strange occurring in her life, and her reaction is, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Which means the scene is entirely exposition. Here's one thing that you ought to know about scenes involving MacGuffins. They often contain plenty of exposition and ample exchange of objective, plot-relevant information to progress the story. Just hang on to that. You'd think that in a scene like this, we'd get Kairi expressing her feelings on this subject. Is she upset about this situation? Has she accepted it regardless of her own personal reservations? Is she suppressing her feelings? Or is she more focused on the positive side of things, like, meeting Sora and Riku? Who the hell knows? This scene isn't here to explore Kairi's life, or more importantly, it isn't here to present a possible conflict in her story. No, it's just here to explain why she's here on Destiny Island, despite not being a native. That's wonderful. Absolutely based. A grand opportunity to establish internal and external conflict. Absolutely wasted. While I'd love to divulge more analysis on the conflicts Kairi faces in Kingdom Hearts 1, I really wasn't joking about her being a delicious egg McMuffin. I mean McGuffin. She's mostly a living corpse that drives the conflict our best boys face until Sora gives Kairi her heart back. Kairi, the absentee white mage, and Chad Goof get surrounded by Heartless and even an Ansem. Kairi vows to protect little Heartless Sora and does just that by shielding him from the Heartless and restoring his heart and human body. Oh yes, we'll discuss Kairi's ill-defined powers and abilities later, but for now, know that this will be an annoying trend that is, say it with me now, indicative of terrible characterization. Otherwise, yeah, not much to analyze on this scene other than it's being generic, but fine in a vacuum. It doesn't really offer any conflicts worth talking about unless you count the whole weak character having to be strong. and it's not really offering any personality beyond nice girl being nice. Anyway, fast forward and we reach the end of her Kingdom Hearts 1 appearance, with her and Sora having to part ways while Sora looks for Riku and Mickey. Second verse, same as the first. It's pretty basic fare as far as interactions go, with nothing remarkable being shown or stated about Kairi as a person or how she reacts to these circumstances.
Make him stop!
Yes, I know. Let's talk. This is one of the major cutscenes of Kairi that people really remember. You know, she's in the secret place while one of Utada Hikaru's masterpieces play for us. It is well directed, and you do get a sense of Kairi finally expressing emotions about her situation. A sense of sobriety and loneliness is very palpable, so you could argue this scene serves as good development for her character. However, I'm reluctant to consider this scene as solid proof that there is a potential for her character, and that is down to one very simple factor: continuity and follow-through. Allow me to explain. Imagine Kairi having to lose all of her stability in the blink of an eye. When the time comes for her to return home and recapture that stability, it's broken by her going home alone with no reassurances that her close friends are safe and by her side. Naturally, that could become a motivator to get her involved in all this Ansem madness, or perhaps even scare her enough to want to stay out of this whole thing completely. 'Tis an interesting conundrum, no? Too bad none of that actually happens. Yeah, I'm afraid this scene, as it stands with context from her future appearances, simply stands to show how Kairi will miss her friends at best, or a simple epilogue at worst. None of the scene really builds to significant character development for Kairi. You get no character, no motivation, no goals, but most importantly, no goddamn conflict. Because of that, it feels like the interesting concepts that could be explored are the results of the excellent direction and cinematography, not the strength or potential of Kairi's character or story. So, step forward in realism, I'll give you that much. With her actually reacting to external stimulus, but 10 steps back on the character conflict. Sad to see such an iconic scene reduced to being a cute scene to wrap up the plot for the game and bench the MacGuffin. Classy. And so we arrive at the well-loved Kingdom Hearts 2, and I gotta say, this might be Kairi at her best. And by the best, I mean she's working with some actual material. See, while all the shit of Kingdom Hearts 1's ending and Chain of Memories happen, Kairi's been where she belongs, on a bench. I mean, Destiny Island. Living the good old normie life. Studying, hanging out with friends, forgetting Sora, the goodest shit. After nobody shenanigans with Roxas and Naminé, Kairi manages to remember her friends. Or, well, mainly Sora. Consider this yet another topic we'll divulge at a later time, as, looking back on it and penning this script, this game kinda marks the last significant moments between Kairi and Riku, making the lapse of memory serve as a serious indicator of the inevitable demarcation of their relationship, but I digress. Remembering Sora kinda jolts the redheaded princess up, and she decides to start looking for her friends with one of the best lines she probably has on record.
Maybe waiting isn't good enough.
Wow, finally, thank the gods, hallelujah. See, this isn't just about Kairi missing her friends. This is about the sobering realization that years of inactivity paved the way for a deep dissatisfaction and an issue left unresolved, paving the way for Kairi to genuinely question her actions in the future.
Yeah! Hey, come on, baby!
Break out the champagne. The princess got something.
Exactly. If you have a dream, don't wait. Act. One of life's little rules. Got it memorized?
No.
Let go of me! Let go!
No!
It was too good to be true. I blame myself for this. I wonder if you all can truly recognize what's wrong with this scene. Like, I bet you're probably thinking it's just the Axel kidnaps the princess thing, right? The damsel in distress is what's triggering me. No, actually that's not the main issue here, though it is a fucking problem. Per the usual, it ties into Kairi and her lack of agency. Our girl finally makes a decision, inferring a want to set out into the world to look for her best friends, deciding that after so long that maybe waiting for them isn't gonna work. She simply misses them too much and worries for their safety, especially after realizing that lapse in memory. She no longer wants to sit on her ass and hope for better, but god damn it, that just doesn't fucking matter as of now. Because instead of getting a scene with her setting out on a journey to look for them, maybe going to see Minnie or the other princesses or some other rando to get clues, we instead get her being confronted by Axel, manipulated, and kidnapped as an accessory for his desires and goals. At this point, you really would think I was fucking joking. It's not funny though. It's really depressing, considering this is Kairi at her best. Though, I think the funnier fact is that there exists a version of these events actually done right. Okay, so this feels like the perfect time to bring up the manga. See, while I could blame that Kairi is a bit of a not-so-good character lacking anything resembling humanity, the same cannot be said for her manga incarnation. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but know this. Manga Kairi feels real. Like, she's spunky, headstrong, sweet if you're not on her bad side, and sometimes a bit of a ditz. She consistently avoids being stuck as a damsel in distress, reacts to the terrible circumstances she finds herself in, and, most importantly for this discussion, has internal and external conflict that she confronts with agency. Like, just take a look at this panel real quick, where she and Axel meet, and be amazed as my girl squares up with these bitch-ass nobodies, grabs a beautiful canine companion, and hauls ass, flipping off Axel as a chef's kiss. It's simply superb, and it is everything Kairi is capable of in this narrative. In this small moment, you get the sense that she is an active component of her own story. Feels like a girl you'd actually know in your life, has a solid personality, and leaves a distinct mark in viewers' eyes. No, I'm not joking. Like, seriously, this manga is practically a meme amongst the fandom because of how well it managed to handle Kairi's characterization. Which is my low-key plug for you to go read the Kingdom Hearts manga. If you're a Kairi fan, you will not be disappointed. I promise. Trust me. But enough on great writing. We need to focus on the bad. So where were we? Yeah. A classic scene of damsel in distressing with a sprinkle of fridging foreshadowing. And, Namine goes ahead and saves the day. Kairi reunites with Riku, where Riku, gives Kairi a keyblade.
You can't keep getting away with it!
Heavy sigh. So, just as when she invoked the inheritance ceremony with little to no significance, she gets her keyblade with little to no significance. I'm not going to go into a whole diatribe on this. I will simply ask you to imagine a very lovely scenario with me. Come on, just dream with me for a minute. Imagine Kairi being stuck in prison, hitting the usual heroic slump and feeling like she failed to stand tall and find her friends, perhaps even lamenting having to be rescued yet again. After giving herself a bit of a pep talk, maybe with a young blonde girl named Namine who speaks to her from within her heart, she stills herself, refusing to be in this situation, affirming that she's not going to continue waiting for people to save her or to people to make actions for her. No, she's going to steel herself, get ready, and find a way out. And in that fit of full-on determination, she summons her Keyblade and manages to escape confinement, signifying a major change in her narrative and marking progress in her internal and external conflict as she is one step closer to not just being able to find her friends, but protect them. Just imagine it.
No, permission not granted.
Well, let's wrap this up. Kingdom Hearts 2 doesn't really provide us with much more Kairi content. She bats off a few Heartless, reunites with Sora, shows Riku's true form to Sora so that they can reunite like the good boyfriends they are, sits out the final battle for obvious reasons, and everyone reunites on Destiny Island with the typical sequel bait. 2 was a bit bittersweet for this young redhead. Conflict, tension, and arc, all were just within reach for Kairi, and to be honest, the setup is there. All that was needed was intent and follow-through. We just needed to establish the internal, external fears and wants that drive Kairi. We needed to allow her to explore those conflicts. They didn't need to be solved, but they did need to be communicated to the audience as problems for Kairi to face. Unfortunately, 'twas not to be, and we're left with a bit of a tease. And, that's Kairi at her best. Mediocre, subpar, a character that touches on the surface of being a good character. Oh boy. Y'all bitches don't know how excited I am to talk about Kingdom Hearts 3.
I'm making a complete what of myself?
Everybody already knows Kairi sucked ass in 3 because anything set up in 2 or other games didn't mean shit. Well, fuck it, I'm gonna talk about it anyway. Now, Mr. Krabs is right. Most players are pretty aware of the flaws with Kairi in Kingdom Hearts 3, but I'm gonna try to supplement those perspectives and put a neat little bow on those sentiments with a solid thesis statement. Kingdom Hearts 3 Kairi was an absolute train wreck in a lot of retrospects. And that is due to 3 reasons. The culmination of failures to properly develop substantial stakes in her story, a failure to deliver a payoff no matter how small or big the story element, and no attempt being made to establish a new conflict that was uniquely her own for the next game. In other words, while this entire game is about giving payoffs, concluding arcs, and establishing new directions for both characters and story alike, Kairi is yet again bereft of content. So let's hit the basic points, because I feel like this section is getting girthy as hell. So the first appearance for Kairi in 3 is her and Axel in the hyperbolic time chamber. We get a pretty wholesome scene of her and Axel essentially discussing their feelings about future developments they'll encounter. You know, like Ventus looking like Roxas, that whole debacle, and Kairi's want to free Nominate.
Objection!
Okay, now before you remark that this is a conflict for Kairi, know that no game, I really mean it, no game has ever specified her desire to free Naminé, is never explored, and will amount to absolutely goddamn nothing, as she will never actively pursue this goal or play a part in Naminé's actual return in the game. Sorry, just had to nip that in the bud. To be truthful though, as wholesome as this scene is and beneficial to Kairi in ways we'll discuss a little later, this scene honestly has very little to do with developing Kairi. It's honestly more of an overview of her story, but if I look at this a little more critically with the context of the future, storylines, and plots, I'd say this scene is more about servicing Axel's internal conflicts. Don't believe me? The main takeaways for Kairi is her want to free Naminé, and since we've established the scene never carries any weight in the future, it can be inferred that this line is mostly elaborated on as a comparison to Roxas and Naminé. The other aspect of this scene is her writing letters to Sora. She specified they're for herself, but we are given no internal conflicts to tie this to, and she never really elaborates on that. But look at Axel. We can see callbacks to his conflict regarding losing his best friends and how that drives him to better himself as a Keyblade user. We get his conflict over his actions as a nobody and his want to embrace both identities, you know, the good and the bad. We establish some new concerns regarding his relationship with Ventus and what that means for Roxas going forward. Oh, would you look at that? A character that has an internal and external conflict.
Good.
Ultimately, as much as I enjoyed this scene, it's definitely not giving anything in the narrative development department for Kairi. Sad, because all they had to do was give Kairi a single reference to the events in Kingdom Hearts 2. You know, the maybe waiting isn't enough thingy. She could have alluded to that being her reason for even training. Like, okay, picture it. After tearing up over memories of Xion, Axel tries to change the subject, or perhaps subconsciously views Kairi as similar to Xion. Anyway, Axel asks whether Kairi's ready for this sort of thing. He acknowledges the weight of the situation and how this would be her first major battle. Kairi gets a strange, perhaps solemn face, but explains calmly how she refuses to be left behind, constantly worrying about her friends. She acknowledges that she likely isn't ready for this kind of fight, but that she can't forgive or allow herself to be idle. Not only does this develop in further previous developments with her character, it also adds spicy context to certain future events. What can I say? A little development goes a long way. Let's move it along, shall we? The next major scene involving her is when the freshly obtained Guardians unite and Aqua recognizes Kairi. Don't get too excited, because Kairi doesn't remember anything, so nothing of substance in this scene. Then we get to the strangest scene in Kingdom Hearts 3, and probably the take that's going to be the hardest to explain due to its irreverent heat. I honestly don't want to waste time on this scene since, you know, it's mostly supposed to be a payoff for the first game's Palpu scenes, but I said I'd be thorough, and thorough I shall be. Let's get started. We start with Sora and Kairi, separated from Riku, who needs time alone to talk to the Repliku. Repliku. So much and yet so little to say.
One crisis at a time.
Nah, I'll leave Repliku alone, but seriously, no major scene for the entire Destiny trio before a big battle where any of them can die? No single scene for Kairi and Riku to interact? No? No? Fine. Alright then. Sora, being him, is endlessly curious about his boyfriend, but Kairi sways him with some delicious be-by-no-more fruit, which, elicits this reaction. Make of it what you will. Kairi specifies that the fruit is actually the be-platonic fruit, and Sora promises to keep her safe, with Kairi saying she'll keep him safe, as the two share 2 fruits, instead of 1, like the legend says.
There comes a time in all forms of media consumption where you are so utterly bewildered by an event taking place that there are so many things wrong with it that you don't have words and you simply laugh.
I swear, this scene had me laughing in pure confusion for like an hour. Like, I knew what the scene wanted to do, but it just doesn't do it. Oh boy. Welcome to the first post-production note that I wasn't sure how to fit into the, script organically, so here it is. So as I just mentioned before, this scene's cinematography is baffling at worst and decent at best, since the intentions of the scene are very much up to interpretation. Is this a platonic scene between friends, a relationship upgrade? Is it an attempted proposal with rejection on Sora's part? Did Kairi recontextualize the proposition after seeing Sora's reaction? Well, I actually found the answer after doing a bit of research. According to an interview with Sora's voice actor, Miyu Irino, this scene was redone and had multiple cuts produced. Tetsuya Nomura appeared to be cautious about the scene being interpreted as romantic, and worried that the audience would be unable to see their relationship as platonic with certain takes, which even resulted in a take where the two didn't share the fruit at all. As a result, Remind features the two seeing that moment as an affirmation of their friendship, and a promise to always be connected physically. So, yeah, that explains a lot of the direction for that scene now that I've actually read that. But, I'll keep my original point. Take it as the analytical ramblings of an audience member who wasn't sure what the objective goal of the scene was. So, yeah, let's keep going. I'll save the more analytical diatribe regarding Kairi's various relationships for a different section, since we are currently focused on examining Kairi's plots and arcs. But just know, for now, this scene suffers from what I'm gonna coin the Naruhina effect. However, in regards to the criticism being discussed in this section, the scene suffers from the lack of development necessary to culminate in a resolved plot point, so it fails as a payoff, whether this is romantic or platonic. Now we finally get to the meat of the game at the Keyblade Graveyard, where Terranort just bodies everyone like it's a game of Uno with draw 25s. Donald pulls the ultimate Uno reverse card, which causes the Heartless Hurricane to flip the goddamn table. Kairi stands around like a mannequin, but that's a problem for another day, and as I keep repeating, we'll come back to every goddamn problem noticed. File it away as Kairi fails to pull her weight in combat. We get a good old game over that requires Sora to use the power of waking to use an old save state, with Kairi using her Princess of Heart abilities to facilitate this. Don't ask how. You are thinking entirely too hard. All in all, Kairi doesn't really contribute to the conflict at hand, unsurprising considering she has very little bearing on this plot. The most we get from her is her helping Sora reset the timeline somehow, but, per usual, it doesn't really have an effect on her overall story. She'll never comment on it, it's not tied in with any of her ill-developed storylines, and won't be relevant to future events, so, it's a decent scene. Could be so much worse. Kairi pairs with Lee to fight Aiza, Xemnas, and She Who Cannot Be Named. The Sea Salt Trio and Sora are all that really matter for this whole debacle, so let's fast forward. Okay, Further. Whoa, wait one goddamn second.
Kairi!
What difference does one little light
Damsel Kairi strikes again, goddamn. And no, Remind's retcons don't fix this shit. She is still kidnapped in a situation where she should absolutely be able to either break Xemnas' grip or summon her Keyblade to her other hand. It's a trick Sora was capable of in the first damn game. You know what's ironic? If handled properly, this scene would have fulfilled our quota for furthering Kairi's plot development or, giving her a new conflict. Now, if you'll recall, I proposed a scene where Lee and Kairi are self-aware of Kairi's weaknesses, and she argued that despite being a bad fit for this battle, she had to be involved regardless because of her hang-ups with being left behind in Kingdom Hearts 2 and the consequences of it. Now, I take that development and I raise you further development. From that exchange between her and Lee, one could infer that Kairi is self-aware of her role as the load and the damsel. While her decision to be on the front lines now is primarily driven by her internal conflict of not wanting to wait around for the good or bad things to happen to her or her friends, her external conflict could have been to fight against Xehanort, or just contribute in general, establishing herself as a capable fighter that can protect herself and her friends. Okay, so we take this, and we can lay the groundwork for a new internal and external conflict as she blames herself for certain events that keep putting Sora in shit situations to save her ass. Being kidnapped by Xemnas despite giving her all and winding up in a similar predicament again would have felt like a sad yet understandable result that served a purpose for character development, not plot development. Fun ideas, but they are not the reality we're in. As it stands, it's just more damsel shenanigans. But now we reach the best worst moment in this game. The true culmination of everything wrong with Kairi when it comes to tension and conflict. When it comes to her personal narrative. The next moment of Kairi's story involves her being killed. Yep. Murdered by Xehanort to motivate Sora.
There comes a time in all forms of media.
Oh, the pain. Oh god, it hurts so bad. Okay, irritation at this point is redundant. It's just plain pain, folks. One of the main characters, best friend of Sora and Riku, and main princess of heart, is fridged. And you know what? It kinda makes sense. Kairi has nothing at this point in the franchise. As shown in the previous chapters, she's lacked any agency or presence in the narrative, and as we've seen through the last mainline games, has had no subplots to call her own. In the end, she's killed off unceremoniously with nothing to really add to her name. The death of a character is often significant because of, cessation. The cessation of a story, an active relationship, a plot line. Cessation always leaves its mark. But not for Kairi. Nope, a true culmination of the failure to deliver meaningful conflicts that had interesting endings. And since she's no more, no new conflicts will arise. But wait, could it be?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Yup. According to Remind, Sora used the power of waking again to restore and fight an apparition of Xehanort? Whatever the fuck that means. Let's just keep on trucking. We wrap up Kairi's story in Kingdom Hearts 3 with some vlog-ass shit. I don't know, y'all. We get a montage of her and Sora bonding without Riku before Sora dies. Ugh. Still no new developments for her story, even with the DLC, huh? And that, my friends, is the tale of Kairi. No substantial narratives, she's just really along for the ride. So let's move on to the next. The side games. I'll be honest, I had to debate whether any non-mainline games should be discussed since Kairi's very much a non-presence in them, so consider this the lightning round. I've already mentioned Birth by Sleep in the realism section. Kairi doesn't respond or have agency in regards to her origin story, so no conflict is established. Bam! Chain of Memories is Naminé's show, which... did they ever explain how a Princess of Heart could have a nobody? Like, I remember them mentioning her sharing a body with Sora made it possible, but is there anything else on this? Leave a comment, because this is one of those plot thingies that I never can answer. Anyway, we do know that Kairi is still chilling on Destiny Island waiting for the boys, so no conflict and an accessory to another's narrative. Beat! Days is practically Chain of Memories with Xion instead of Naminé. So, beat! Coded barely featured her beyond her reading the letters with Sora and Riku. But Dream Drop Distance has Kairi as one of the twist endings, with Yensid planning to train her to defend herself against Organization 13, who possibly could target her. And shock of all shocks, but mid. Since it establishes a new conflict that has potential for growth on a physical and mental level, I'd give her a good, but we all know how well that training turned out. 0.2 is Dream Drop Distance with a sprinkle of details on the contents of her training, so mid-ish. Now for the media side game, Melody of Memories, Kairi's game. So let's start it off. Kairi's put to sleep and... wait a minute. So Kairi is placed into a deep sleep so the others can explore her memories for clues for Sora's whereabouts. The game is, at its core, a glorified clip show, until Kairi is confronted by an illusion memory of Xehanort. Despite claiming she's improved, Kairi gets her ass handed to her by her own memories and has to be saved by her memory of Sora. Xehanort drops the hints of another side of this world existing. Kairi shares. We swing by Final World and receive the last clues to find Quadratum. But get this. Kairi wants to come along, but Riku, in his own socially awkward way, just tells but doesn't tell her that she can't go. For obvious damn reasons, and she decided to train with Aqua after reporting to Mickey and Yen Sid. So let's add things up real quick. Kairi-centric game, plus clip show, plus lack of exhibited development on a physical or emotional level, times being a damsel again, times being sidelined, plus retreaded promise of a training arc equals bad, fucking abysmal. And that, my friends, is the journey of one Kairi in the side games. Underdeveloped and lackadaisical. Exactly what you'd expect at this point. If there's one thing that should be salvaged from all this, it's that there's a bit of a lesson here for aspiring writers. Conflict is the backbone of any well-developed character. Without it, you'll have a character that leaves audiences, well, questioning what the purpose even was of even designing the character. Learn from Kairi, friends. Learn. Phew. That took a long-ass time, but 'twas necessary to give a proper overview and analysis of Kairi's role throughout the last 28 years or story. Worry not, this and the next chapter won't be nearly as long, as they're both pretty straightforward. This is probably the most simplistic section, as when you think of the concept of character, your mind probably gravitates towards personality first and foremost. When you're thinking about a great character, you're thinking about a person who has a very defined sense of self. You think about who they are, how they interact with the world, the types of relationships they build, and the overall impact left on the world from their very existence. Kingdom Hearts is no exception. There's a multitude of interesting faces and folk to meet, each with a distinct personality. But what makes a personality click? What traits land a character in a Watch Mojo top 10?
Number 4, Sakura.
Okay, bad example. But what makes personality resonate is how it affects their realism and their conflict. Oh boy, did you see what I did there? Big brain strikes again, baby. Personality, strengths and weakness, flaw and advantage. All of these concepts influence the direction of a character's story and their relatability with the audience, which naturally helps them be endearing. It's not a stretch to say a character with no personality will have no true narrative stakes or relatability. Not so subtle transition to Kairi. Let's start dissecting. So how does one describe Kairi? It's perhaps best to start by saying Kairi's heart is described as pure and full of light, meaning Kairi is only capable of being a kind and caring soul. She's definitely upbeat with a level of selflessness and courage when those she cares for are in deep danger. As far as flaws go, if one digs deep enough, you can extrapolate a fear of change, at least in the first 2 games, that manifests in some stubbornness. And, actually, I think that's it. To the untrained eye, Kairi seems like a solid character. But open your eyes, bruh! That would be wrong. Deliciously wrong. Let's cut the build up. Kairi is an extremely boring and bland character, and not just on a subjective level. She lacks any depth or flavor on a basic level, and I believe I have an explanation for that. You see, she's a rather boring character because she's a rather boring archetype. So, let me explain. See, Kairi is actually what we in the business call a Type B shonen female protagonist. But what the fuck am I on about? Well, male-targeted media in Japan, especially anime, tends to have about 2 discernible types of personalities that are common amongst the female characters. There's Type A, the cute but brash girl. Known for her hairline temper, she is often seen as spunky, assertive, and extroverted. She may not be the strongest, but has little issue with violence, especially towards the main protagonist. If she's waifu, it's 'cause you want a girl who would beat your ass. Think your Sakuras or your Namis. Then there is Type B, the reserved and inoffensive girl. Type Bs are usually a stark contrast to Type A, being kind, caring, and introverted. They're often there to support others, and their major moments involve crying or high empathy. They're the pure-hearted Yamato Nadeshiko waifu that the local simple go to war for. Think of it this way. If Type A is spicy, Type B is sweet. You know, think of your Orihimes and Hinatas. I think you can see the dots starting to connect, yeah? Okay, but so what? She's a cliche. Lots of characters are cliche, you might proclaim. Well, allow me to propose a perspective. See, the issue with tropes, or cliches, isn't that something is cliche or tropey. Now, tropes become a problem when there is no distinguishing characteristics beyond that cliche. Cliches are at their best when they are simply blueprints, a base. As you map that base, more traits are added, giving a more distinct feel that can fit the standard, but also defy the standard. I mentioned Nami for Type A, and she's a good example of this philosophy. Sure, she's a spicy gal, always ready to scold Luffy for having the brain of a walnut. She's assertive and extroverted. However, that's literally not even scratching the surface of her character. She can be charismatic and, as a result, quite manipulative if treasure is on the line. She has a penchant for cowardly behavior, but is always ready to throw down when it's the only logical option. She can be vulnerable, intelligent, and caring. Does Nami fit the archetype? Absolutely. Does she subvert the archetype? Definitely. And that, my friends, is where Kairi falls short. Beyond the archetype, there's nothing to Kairi. She fits like a glove. And because she's 100% trope, you've seen Kairi's personality in so many different properties and probably done so much better. She just feels boring on both a technical and a practical level and fails to leave an impression. You know, talking about this actually brings me to another issue that pops up pretty often when it comes to cliches in Kairi. Have you all ever heard of, the satellite love interest? Oh yes, my friends, we're going there. Allow me to take you on another journey of how tropes essentially fucked Kairi's character beyond belief. First, let's define a satellite character. A satellite character is, well, Kairi. More specifically, it's a character that's motivations, personality, and, character exists to service the main character. I'm not going to impart any judgment on this trope as a whole, because mainly I've seen it as a case-by-case basis, but I think you know that Kairi fits the trope a little too easily. But there is another. Satellite love interests. Satellite love interests are satellite characters that happen to be love interests, which is a whole nother bag of bullshit if we're honest. You know what? Fuck it. This is now a detour and everything wrong with Kairi's relationships. I'm going to streamline this so we can get back on topic, but let's get started. Relationships, whether platonic or romantic, are integral to storytelling. Don't believe all the anti-shipping discussion. Not only do they help the audience relate to and enjoy characters, but it adds depth to characters through interactions, and can even influence the character's overall plot and decisions. I mean, come on, how many times have you seen a character completely change their perspective based entirely on the foundation or formation of a new relationship? Now, that certainly sounds like a thing in Kingdom Hearts, right? No surprise that most of Kairi's relationships don't do anything of the sort. To spice things up for this little mini chapter, I'm gonna rate her dynamics from best to worst. While ranking them, I will denote 3 factors. 1. What the relationship does for her personal journey. 2. The chemistry. And 3. How the relationship changes or evolves. See, I find all these to be the basic and well-deserved makings of a well-developed relationship that services the characters and the overall narrative. P.S. Since this is essentially another lightning round, I'm ignoring any dynamics that are incredibly bare bones, like her friendship with, Titus, Waka, Selkie, Hainer, Pence, Olette. Those are just wasting time and nitpicking, and we're not that pedantic. At least not intentionally. So, let's start with the best. We've got Axel and Lee. What the fuck? Oh yes, I'm certain a few draws just dropped for that bombshell, but it is undeniably the best written dynamic available of her minuscule 4. Alright, the best element of their relationship has got to be the development. It starts, I debated this, but let's be honest, it really does start with Axel and Kairi in Kingdom Hearts 2. See, the two of them have parallel issues, but being on opposite sides. They both want to see their friends who are currently unobtainable through their own means. In the beginning, Axel sees Kairi as an object, a means to an end, and seeks to use her to reach Roxas and is willing to extort and manipulate her to do so. There's not much shown about how she views Axel. Realism. But we can assume she viewed him as she viewed all antagonists. You bad guy, I not like bad guy. By 3, a lot has changed. Primarily, Axel died, which allowed Lee to get his heart back. To prepare for the upcoming war, Lee and Kairi are in close quarters as they train to be proficient with their Keyblades. It's during this time that the two delve into their history. While this scene could be a lot more substantive, it's decent development to see their history acknowledged and worked through. Their chemistry is actually pretty solid as well. You don't have a dynamic between Kairi and Axel that feels, defined by tropes, expectations, genre savviness. Nah, it just feels like two people who had a pretty stilted relationship moving forward and kind of getting a more cordial one as they kind of realize they've got a lot of similarities to build a solid foundation. Kairi and Axel both know that what they want more than anything is to protect the bonds they formed, and not in your typical protagonist way. Now that's exclusively for Sora. Rather, they want to simply maintain the relationships they used to have after being deprived of them for so long. And it's pretty wholesome. All things considered, I do see why this dynamic kind of struck a chord with players. No, seriously, it gained quite the following after Kingdom Hearts 3. With this dynamic, I feel like we have a rarity for Kairi. Hints of depth for both her and another character. From how Lee is dealing with the concept of being a nobody and the memories that came from that time, to his deepest desire to see Roxas and the glimmers of his repressed memories of she who cannot be named. Hell, while it is not substantial enough to add some level of realism or narrative stakes, I cannot deny that it is something to have Kairi express an interest in freeing Namine and letting her live her own life. Again, it's a small lingering dredge, and it doesn't amount to anything. That conflict section this is not me arguing.
Hey, I was wrong in the old section. No.
And we get these lingering threads of characterization from the relationship between Kairi and Lee. That's not bad, all things considered, and it's the reason why I deem it her best relationship. Kairi's given something to work with. Granted, her characterization doesn't pedal forward with any of this, but that's not new shit, as it's mostly a tell-don't-show situation, but it's something. Rather something than nothing for me. Tragic this may be, this is perhaps our best relationship. Anything beyond this is a mid-tier, just a not good kind of sitch. So let's move on and try to ignore the elephant in the room. Our mid-tier relationship and the coveted silver medal goes to her relationship with Namine. To be fair, it's an unremarkable relationship with potential. That's really what I think gives it the silver medal, the potential. It lacks any distinct chemistry since they've had only a few interactions, and they're very bare bones and about as much, and they're very plot reliant. So the minuscule interactions don't present possible individual growth or relationship that can grow. So why am I touting them as the second best? Simple. There is massive amounts of potential. That's the strength of having only a select few moments together that lack substance. Unlike the third place relationship, they have opportunities to have more moments with actual substance. Let me explain. Kairi and Namine have yet to have a defining moment, where they interact without the pressure of the narrative behind them. Okay, we're doing it again. Imagine a scene where Kairi and Namine have a proper chat, and Namine brings up the events of Chain of Memories, which causes a bit of tension and perhaps awkwardness, as Kairi is still kind of bothered by what happened. Maybe because she was genuinely disheartened by forgetting Sora. I mean, remember that scene where Roxas is like, I can't remember you fucking forgot me. One of the best scenes, I'm not even gonna lie. Anyway, adding to that, it probably doesn't help that for Sora, Kairi was replaced in these memories, and Sora is currently MIA. This could provide a first for Kairi, in her having a negative relationship with someone that requires a significant development to overcome and form a solid, cordial bond. Yes, there was Axel, but as I said, that dynamic was definitely more defined by opposing sides than genuine negativity. This time, let it be with someone who is on the same side as Kairi. Namine's not a villain. Hell, serve it as a great contrast to Kairi and Lee's relationship, since they managed to overcome their issues by the next arc, while Namine and Kairi's begin in the next arc. Like, I'm essentially proposing that Kairi and Namine start off as people who are awkward around each other and struggling to kind of get through the bad vibes in a more, pronounced way. So, much more tangible, more show don't tell. And then cap it off as an example of Kairi growing and Namine having an actual plot point going forward.
It's bliss.
In fact, let's focus on that. This could also be a good starting point for Namine's personal growth if they decide to let her story revolve around identity and defining herself beyond being Kairi's nobody. So that's why I'm nominating them as the second best relationship for Kairi. There's boundless potential because of how underdeveloped it is at the moment. But we all know one fundamental rule of existence. Things are perfectly balanced.
As all things should be.
Where there's boundless potential, there's also wasted potential, which leads us to the third place. Third place goes to Aqua and Kairi. Namine and Aqua's relationship with Kairi are essentially two sides of the same coin. Where Namine has potential to create an interesting relationship with Kairi, Aqua doesn't. And this one's gonna be weird because everything in terms of concrete evidence suggests that Aqua and Kairi are going to have a relationship going forward. So let's break it down. See, the problem stems from the game in question, Kingdom Hearts 3. Yes, I'm gonna keep telling you that 3 fucked everything up. I'm not gonna stop saying that. Kairi and Aqua meet up for the first time since Birth by Sleep, with Aqua remembering Kairi as a young girl she saved in Radiant Garden. However, Kairi doesn't seem to remember her at all. All she can really say is that she doesn't know her, but she's very grateful for the rescue. In other words, the scene essentially cements that despite having a solid history, their past interactions will not matter, and thus cannot serve as a foundation to any character development, because one party doesn't remember the other. And I can't recall anything in Melody of Memories that indicated that the two of them were going to form a new relationship based on her unsuppressed memories. So, truly, in one singular conversation, any potential for an interesting relationship is shoved in the background.
Hold on. Well, they might do something different or base their relationship off an entirely different dynamic. After all, Kairi's gonna be her apprentice again, remember?
Shut up!
And you'd be wrong. Difficult it may be in this behemoth of a video, remember the previous chapter. We established that written conflict is not Kairi's strong suit, but even more so, the writers building upon potential storylines is definitely not the norm when telling Kairi's story. If there was a plot point introduced for her character, you can guarantee it will go nowhere or be so inconsequential that it won't mean a damn thing. As a result, it's not really hard to assume that future installments won't encourage a deep relationship between the two or build a bond contingent on the teacher-student gimmick. No, chances are much more likely that their interactions are just going to be an explanation for why Kairi has abilities or any proficiency in a fight. If she's present in any of the future games.
Let's not use that take.
See, this is why I gave Silver to Namine. Since there's nothing of substance for Namine and Kairi to work with, there's endless possibilities. They haven't been able to shoot anything down yet. Aqua and Kairi have something of substance, but one aspect will have little to no bearing on their current relationship, while the other is likely to be nothing more than exposition. Ugh. Well, at least their relationship will give Kairi the potential to hold her own in a cutscene fight. Don't worry, we'll talk about the fighting thing. Ugh. And now, my friends, we reach the bottom tier, if you will. The worst relationship for Kairi. Look, I already know this is going to be a controversial take, but I'm nothing if not determined and invested in arguing my points. So sit back and enjoy, because I'm about to go to court, swear myself in, and explain to the best of my abilities why I've made the choices I've made. Bottom tier relationships for Kairi have one of two features that damn them to the depths of shit writing. Number one, they have gotten worse or non-existent over time. Or two, they actively invert the 3 traits of good relationships that I outlined earlier, meaning they have anti to no chemistry. The relationship fails to evolve, or the relationship consumes the character's individuality. And, starting the bottom tier, and second worst is Sora and Kairi? Yes, let your rage consume you. Enjoy the spiciest. Now, I know this is coming as shocking. This is the elephant in the room I mentioned earlier. But, you know, I get it. For most people, the relationship between Sora and Kairi is widely thought to be the saving grace of Kairi's character. They're your typical, female protagonist, male protagonist relationship that's defined by the care and friendly interactions with the romantic coding that suggests a deeper relationship later in the story. That's cute, right? That's what we all want from them. No, to me, that's the problem here. Actually, the problem is the main point of this whole chapter. We started this all off with the quote, "love at first plot convenience." And that is exactly what Sora and Kairi's relationship ultimately is. A strangely written relationship entirely defined by tropes and reliant on the genre savviness of the audience, which leaves the relationship incredibly hollow. Okay, note, as I mentioned before, this section was written before I stumbled across Nomura's comments on the nature of their relationship being written as platonic. So, consider that context for the issues with their dynamic and why it harms Kairi's characterization. I think the best synopsis I can come up with off the top of my head is the inability to clearly define their relationship as platonic has kind of caused it to fall into tropes that limit her role in the narrative and limit the potential of the relationship being a genuine, enjoyable platonic relationship. So, just keep that in mind. I'll put notes on the screen in case. But let's keep going. So, let's get the elephant out of the way. What even is the nature of Sora and Kairi's relationship? As you can recall from Chapter 2, Sora and Kairi's relationship is intended to be platonic, but audience interpretation has kind of varied over the years. For every scene that's, according to some fans, supposed to mark a major advancement in their relationship, there still is a tinge or very palpable sense of ambiguity. Let me give you some examples. Remember when Sora goes to save Kairi?
Oh, I remember.
Aw, how special! Until you realize he'd do it for anyone, and it's up to the audience to interpret this as a romantic gesture. Remember when Kairi hugs him after they reunite?
Oh, I remember.
Well, it's too bad Sora doesn't really have the strongest reaction to it, and it requires audience interpretation to explain why he doesn't show a significant reaction to seeing her again. Remember when I told you that tropes and cliches should never be the whole, but rather the sum of the part?
Oh, I don't remember.
That's too damn bad!
That's the weird problem. The ambiguity of Sora and Kairi's relationship is the result of an over-reliance on tropes that indulge that will they, won't they friend vibe. Again, and I know I keep saying it, but I can't help myself. A cliche and or a trope is at its best when it's used as a building brick, not the whole goddamn house. So, look at their relationship and compare it to other main male-female protag dynamics. Is there anything distinct or unique about it? Hell no. You've seen all this before. You've seen the princess waiting for her knight. You've seen childhood friends that might be crushing on each other. You've seen will they, won't they dynamics with both outcomes. You've seen everything this dynamic has to offer, and it's, at its best, serviceable. And why is it like that? Because the writing wants to have its cake and eat it too. So what is Sora and Kairi's relationship? I posed the question earlier, let's answer it. It's a relationship that is intended to be enjoyed as platonic, while utilizing romantic tropes, which results in a discombobulated mess that doesn't completely please anyone. People who ship the relationship together are inclined to enjoy these moments, but at the same time feel like there's no official nature to it. Sora doesn't call Kairi his girlfriend or anything like that. And those who don't like the ship are kinda confused on the nature of certain scenes and whether or not they're supposed to be official couple upgrades or just basic friendship shit. I'll admit, mess might be a bit of hyperbole, but there's something to be said about a hetero dynamic that's open to interpretation despite the authorial intent. Like, you just don't, like, to make an aside, you just don't see that shit very often with straight couples in media. At least you don't see that shit as the writers doing this by accident. but I digress. Let's get back on topic. At least the chemistry keeps them afloat, right? And speaking of chemistry, let's discuss how this contrasting interpretation fucked the chemistry. Again, mentioned in chapter 2, but let's talk about what I dubbed the Naruhina effect. For the uninitiated, Naruhina is the portmanteau ship name for Naruto and Hinata from, you guessed it, Naruto. The relationship was quite popular and was one of the major players in many a ship war in the 2000s. Trust me, you have not lived till you visited the halls of anal devastation. The ship is complicated. Mostly, in terms of canon, the relationship survived on Hinata's love and loyalty to Naruto, while the ramen lover kind of barely acknowledged her. And I'm not just talking the original series, I'm talking Shippuden as well, which is probably why the ship has aged like milk for a good subsect of the fandom. The entirety of the manga did its job in exploring the depths of Hinata's feelings and their development internally and externally. However, it completely dropped the ball with Naruto. Let's just say you know it's bad when a couple fans can theorize that Naruto settled for Hinata when he realized he couldn't have Sakura, and those theories are accepted. They're accepted. I would have thought it was crazy too if not for the fact that I literally had to watch the Naruto last movie to be able to say, oh, that's how they got together, huh? A movie had to explain how the two could possibly get together after Naruto completely forgot Hinata's dying love confession during the pain arc. You can't write that shit, bro. You really can't. This little circumstance or conundrum is the Naruhina effect. The strange phenomenon of developing one character's investment in the relationship while completely neglecting the other's interest, resulting in a relationship that doesn't convey consistent or enjoyable chemistry at best, and makes no sense to anyone not invested in the relationship at worst. And good God, Kairi and Sora's relationship has that same damn problem. And because of that, their chemistry has always been strange, at least to me. To put it bluntly, it always feels like Kairi is holding the torch for Sora, who, intentionally or not, isn't reciprocating on the same level. And that's the beauty of the Naruhina effect. There's an odd inconsistency on how these two view each other. It even comes down to whether they feel the exact same way about each other. Again, thanks to the writing. It practically stagnates on a romantic level for Sora after Halloween Town in Kingdom Hearts 2, and reaches an unforgettable awkwardness during the Palpu scene for Kairi. A scene that, if executed properly, would have been a major stepping stone in the romantic nature of their relationship. Or could have been the ultimate fulfillment of a platonic promise, but nah, it comes off as a hilariously awkward, subtle confession where Sora either doesn't pick up on Kairi's romantic feelings or doesn't share them. And that's so obvious to Kairi that she has to essentially say, I just want to be in your life. That's it. And that's essentially what their chemistry has been boiled down to. Kairi's feelings for Sora being a major motivator of a lot of what she does. Anyway, we can move on.
It's not enough to wait for someone you care about. If it's impossible to be together, then all you can do is wait. Or, when I was looking around with Kairi, I remembered how important it is to share moments with friends.
Oh, shit. I almost forgot. Okay, so in Melody of Memories, he actually compares the relationship he has with Kairi to that of Chirithy and Ventus, which, for the record, he does not compare them to a Disney prince or princess. No, it's compared to the longing to reconnect between Chirithy and Ventus. Huh. When you really think about it, I guess Nomura really was trying to set the record straight. Anyway, this has gone on long enough. As far as chemistry goes, it's bland, it's inconsistent, it's unflavored, it's tonally messy, it's like bringing buffalo cauliflower to the potluck. It is straight hell. But do you know what's funny? That's not even the worst element of Sora and Kairi's relationship. I mean, you'd think it would be, because chemistry is the backbone of any given dynamic in a story, but we are working with some extreme oddities these days, people. No, the real problem is what this relationship does to Kairi's characterization as a whole. Alright, we can finally circle back full Mobius double reach around. Remember that term, satellite love interest? This trope's pretty common in media and refers to a character whose entire, character exists to serve as a love interest to another character. This can come in a variety of degrees, but honestly, TV tropes probably has the best phrase for it. What does this character do when they're not being a love interest? Keep it in mind. If you can recall, in every singular moment I discussed during the conflict section, you notice that I tell you all the time that Kairi's biggest problems come in two flavors. Raspberry, nothing of substance is given to her story, or blueberry, she fails to build upon the crumbs of development. Would you believe me if I told you a lot, and I mean a lot, of that is because of Sora and Kairi's relationship being the main focus of her characterization? Okay, so I ask you to think about some of the more prominent moments in the story. Kairi's damsel status in Kingdom Hearts 1, her motivation and subsequent objectification in 2, even her own game, Melody of Memories. All of these moments share a similarity. Kairi is motivated by Sora, especially when the plot demands it. Like, seriously, think about it. A character whose story and centralized conflict always, and I so mean it, always ties back to another character that isn't themselves. And that, dear viewer, is the problem. The core component of an ineffective relationship. Sora and Kairi's relationship consistently overshadowed Kairi's own story, and as a result, her development. As we've discussed, the many, scratch that few, other relationships people have with Kairi. You've either seen me say that the relationship has offered growth for Kairi as a person, has potential to offer growth for her character, or just doesn't follow through with it and kind of wastes the opportunity. Now we get the other side of the proverbial coin. A relationship that ultimately denies Kairi character growth. Like, just take a look at one of the more prominent cutscenes in Melody of Memories, where Kairi is fighting the memory cognition illusion of Xehanort. Like, I don't know anymore. Anyway, the most important aspect of the scene could have been showing that Kairi actually was managing to grow, not just as a physical fighter, but as her own person. I know I keep saying it, but if they had actually done something with this moment, it could have been a positive step forward for Kairi. You know, highlight her independence, show that she didn't have to rely on other people to get a job done. It also would have established that she was prepared to move forward in life and perhaps be the one to finally rescue Sora, as she promised in the other two games and makes a big deal of in a big scene in Kingdom Hearts 3. That's right, my friends. Kairi would have gone full girl boss.
Queen, go off, girl boss. What's he have to say?
She wants to look after him. She wants to protect him. But no, we apparently live in Clown World, as Sora has to swoop in and save her again. Look, this scene, when given the benefit of the doubt, exists to show the audience that Sora and Kairi have a good relationship. And as such, Sora is protective of her even when he's not around. Information that has been consistently told to us game after game after game after game to the point of nausea. And that is such a goddamn problem. Kairi doesn't get to have moments dedicated to her personal growth when Sora's involved. She doesn't get to grow as a character because with every scene that involves these two, the relationship's the focus. Every scene is entirely on the care they have for each other. No scene is about how they push each other forward, not how they help each other confront internal conflicts. Hell, it's not even about a relationship that evolves and has discernible changes in dynamic and intimacy. It's nothing. It's just about how Sora will protect Kairi and Kairi cares about him. Trite shit you've seen before, and trite shit that doesn't do anything for Kairi's story. It's almost as if anytime Sora appears, you can expect Kairi's story to be completely non-existent. Oh, it's incredible. Almost laughable. And that's the main reason why this relationship isn't exactly the best, at least to my standards. Yeah, the tropes are bad. Yeah, it's really predictable. Yeah, there's a distinct presence of better relationships in the story. All of that is there, but the true kicker is that the relationship drains the life out of Kairi's story. But hey, it's cute, right? And that's fun fan art and fanfic, so you know, just ignore all the others.
Fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
And now for the worst relationship, which you already know. It's Riku and Kairi. Good grief. In all my years of observing character relationships, romantic or platonic, I swear to God, I've never seen a relationship just completely and utterly regress to the point of being non-existent so fast. It speaks volumes. This is a relationship that was once just as beloved as Sora and Kairi's relationship, but boom, dead. Just dead. I don't think I need to go into too much detail. Riku and Kairi's relationship was pretty strong initially, and a pretty fun juxtaposition to her and Sora's. Though I suppose we should have noticed the cracks in the foundation as far back as the first game, cause anybody remember that cutscene where Kairi jokes about wanting to leave Riku behind and go on the trip with Sora? What the fuck? No need to go into details on that one, Chief, because honestly, I think this is one of those scenes that's either funny in a "oh, well damn" kind of way, or funny in a "well that's pretty fucked, isn't it" kind of way. Pick your poison, neither is better. But let's focus. Moments that make you think aren't the problem. The real issue is that this relationship continues to have less substance with every single game introduced. I can safely say that the last game with Riku and Kairi having a substantive relationship worth noting was probably the second game, where they reunite, fight a couple of Heartless. Well, Kairi's even instrumental in ensuring that Riku doesn't part ways with her and Sora, which was, pretty sweet moment for the two of them. I know a lot of people don't like to talk shit, but I just want to remind people that at one point in time, Riku and Kairi were considered a viable romantic pairing for a lot of fans. I think it's only in recent years that I've noticed the fandom sees it as a bit of a weird potential ship to entertain. Or they think that all the content that you can craft for that ship is exclusive to the first game. Either way, those days are dead and gone. Gone are the days of Riku sacrificing his safety and morals for Kairi, or Kairi joking with and wanting to protect Riku. No, now it's just nothing. As you all can recall, in Kingdom Hearts 3, the pair had, let's see, memory, 6. The two had no interaction in Kingdom Hearts 3 prior to the DLC. Zero. Zilch. Nada. Nunca de mayo. And that is no exaggeration. They speak not a once. I cannot tell you how fun it was writing this script, editing this video, and looking through the clips 3 times for Kingdom Hearts 3, just because I wasn't 100% certain whether I had just straight up forgot that the two didn't talk to each other, or forgot a scene that was small. Nope, I looked. Nothing. While I could go on and on and on about the intricate details in the way I did Sora and Kairi, it'd be overkill. See, Sora and Kairi are a pretty well-loved relationship. It required me to dissect what's the problem. It had to be explained why it was one of the least liked relationships for me when it came to Kairi as a character and the writing behind her character. I ain't gotta do all that for Kairi and Riku. Less substance, which results in no chemistry, no relationship growth, and no substantial character growth as a result. But hey now, they do interact in Melody of Memories, but it's a bit depressing. Depressingly empty, that is. A scene where Riku has to ground Kairi's hopes of helping Sora because she's failed to protect herself and wouldn't be able to help others. That... I keep saying it. I'm so tired of myself saying it. I keep reading this script and I keep saying it, but I'm gonna have to say it again and I can't stop myself from saying it. It's another scene that, if written right, could have had some weight. But nope, cynically speaking, this scene exists solely to shut fans up about the two friends not speaking, and to confirm to the audience that Kairi won't be joining us on this journey since she'd just be the load again. Press F to pay respects. So, what have we learned from this subchapter? Kairi's relationships are, at best, filled with potential and a few good moments. At medium, squandering potential, and at worst, actively undermining her character. Well, ain't that just peachy? Now, where was I before the tangent? Kairi's a standard satellite love interest? Okay, let's get back to that. Kairi's role as the satellite love interest of Kingdom Hearts has completely stymied her as a character, which is, to be expected, because, truthfully, this trope isn't meant for characters who were supposed to be important or have character development. It's just a role, a cliché, a story element, if you will. And for some characters, that works beautifully. I guess a good example I could give is Kyoko from Reborn. Her entire purpose is to be the romantic interest of Suna, to motivate him, and while there are some questionable aspects of having a character exist for that purpose, especially a female character, she's so nondescript and unimportant to the overall plot that you can easily just disregard those problems. Kyoko's just not a major player, just an aspect of Suna's normal schoolboy life, and I guess that's where satellite love interests work at their best. She's a tertiary character, serving a singular role in the narrative. And that is the complete opposite of what Kairi is supposed to be. I mean, look at her. Kairi is Sora and Riku's childhood friend who has been kidnapped over and over again and used by others because she's a princess of heart. She's originated from Radiant Garden. She has a Keyblade. She's a guardian of light. All these important titles, when used correctly, are meant to signal to the audience that Kairi is a major player in this story. But at her core, she is only used in the narrative for her relationship to other characters, or to be exposition, deus ex machina, or development for other character stories. Truth be told, this is the unfortunate lot in life for this archetype when the character isn't blessed with irrelevance from the start. Don't make them side characters, and they start to feel like they're only around to enhance the story of other characters. As I said, this is only a comfortable role for characters when it's intentional, or for God's sakes, you don't waste time giving multiple titles, and thus an inflated sense of importance to a character who's just there for, the main protagonist story. So, the role of a satellite love interest mostly afforded Kairi a few generic positive traits for personality. A bit lackluster, but hey, what can you do? But what about her negative traits? Surely they're interesting enough to sublimate the other qualities. Well, the worst aspects, the flaws of Kairi are, complicated. Let me explain. On the basis of her in-universe character, Kairi doesn't really have any traits that really constitute relevant flaws. See, a character flaw requires weight to be considered as such. One cannot have a character that is described as clumsy but never have the flaw impact their life beyond, minor inconveniences or comedy. No, the flaw of clumsiness, if a writer bothers to assert it as a flaw, should be a major problem that impedes the character on a physical and mental level. Take Haruka from the Idolmaster franchise. Her clumsiness can be for comedy, but every single time they can fit it into her story, they will fit it into her story. And it becomes something that limits her as an idol consistently. Her clumsiness, as a result, kind of limits what jobs she can take, what dances she can perform comfortably, and it contributes to her inferiority complex in many of the stories. That flaw, no matter how inconsequential it sounds on paper, matters. Now, let's look at Kairi's flaws. Kairi doesn't have flaws. At least none of them that are intentional on Nomura's part. For example, you can say Kairi, in a way, fears change. I mentioned this earlier for Kingdom Hearts 1, but let's go in depth. See, the problem is that this fear, I only came to that in conclusion after essentially analyzing the media and combing through for scraps. This is a fear that is only inferred, and one can only gander such a perspective from the first game, meaning you really got to have your monocle out, folks. Well, mine is stapled to my face, so let's begin explaining this flaw. Kairi approaches the upcoming adventure with apprehension. She wants to cling to Sora as a constant, and even asks him not to change. When rescued, she immediately wants to return back to Destiny Island to return to normality. She revisits their secret place the minute her new reality sets in, so she can relive better times. From these instances, one can infer a sense of aversion towards change, and perhaps the events of Kingdom Hearts 1 did not break her out of that, making it a legitimate fear for Kairi that prevents her from being more active in situations. This would create a character flaw. Again, though granted, and gotta keep emphasizing this is mostly just something you can take from her character. This is not explicit, and thus, it's more subjective conjecture than objective direction. Nonetheless, it would be inauthentic of me not to mention it as a possible, well-thought-out flaw that fleshes out Kairi. See? I'm not pointlessly negative. Just cynical. Then there's... I think that's it. It's crazy. I'm actually trying to come up with more flaws that are, at least thematic or can be scrounged up through some analysis of the material, but, I got nothing. Not even to prove a point. Heck, there's no obvious flaws either. She's not quick to anger, rude, clumsy, unintelligent, cowardly. Nothing. She has no flaws. And this is not because the writer didn't want the character to be perceived negatively and thus omitted the flaws. That's a problem too, but no, it's just... I think the writers forgot to give her any flaws. It's honestly unsettling. And, that's probably the root of why her character has no conflict on an internal level. When you have no personal flaws to confront on the fool's journey, you have a fool with no essence, if you will. No personality, no flair, no reason to root for them. I'm not going to go into a detailed rant on why characters need flaws. Seems extreme at this point, and I think you all are getting everything very quickly. So you all know why a character needs to have a personality full of pros and cons. And naturally, Kairi flunks the test again with F's galore.
To give you a super F.
There's a reason why people, myself included, interpret Kairi as more of a plot device than a character, and it's really nonsense like this that does it. Minimal positive traits that contribute to a pleasant personality, and no flaws to give her any humanity. Bland at best, ignorable at mid, and annoying at worst. That's our main female protagonist, everybody. Well, I think it's time to kick it up a notch. I've been hyping it up for 2 chapters. Let's talk about fighting. Kairi's not that great of a fighter, and rarely contributes to any conflict that involves fighting. Just want to get that on the record. Alright, so people are probably going to question, why do I even need to discuss her lack of physical prowess or utility when it comes to battle? And I'm going to make it as simple as possible. In action and shonen media, power is everything.
Power is power.
And an absence of power? Well, that's just as important as an abundance of power. This is why, whenever you're telling a story that has action in it, you're going to have to explain why some characters are capable of doing everything, and why some characters are capable of doing nothing. Well, you have to do that if you want it to have a sound and cohesive narrative and power structure. Kingdom Hearts is an action game, so it doesn't really get to just have characters who happen to be weak or powerful and not explain or explore what that means for the character or the overarching narrative. So naturally, it feels only necessary that we discuss this in relationship to Kairi. Some fans may find this pedantic. I find it kind of necessary if you want to paint the full picture of everything right and wrong with this character. Kairi has a pronounced lack of physical prowess. She is a terrible fighter, and completely unhelpful in any form of combat scenario, whether that be healing, damage output, or protecting anybody. She just happens to be a character who can't really, do anything. But is that really the only problem, that Kairi manages to be weak? No, not at all, actually. In fact, in action and shonen, there's actually a rich cornucopia of plot to explore for these kinds of stories. We could use some examples, so I'll show you 2 examples in anime of this being done wrong and this being done right. The first is Lucy Heartfilia from Fairy Tail. Lucy is a lesser fighter. This is not debatable. It's consistently her role. She's honestly not very good at any given role in combat. Not offense, not defense, not support. You can comfortably slot her in as a tank, a DPS, or a healer. And yes, I'm using RPG logic. That's how much of a geek I am. And it's just easier to define fighting styles this way. Sue me. Lucy is often than not the damsel in distress of the narrative. She often fails to defeat any villains without assistance or deus ex machina, or she fails to, make a sizable impact in battle. However, the story never infers to you that this is a problem, nor does it ever present Lucy's lack of strength as a recognized issue. In fact, you'll find many characters that say Lucy's a competent and very capable mage because she is someone who fights with her spirits instead of using them as tools, and wonderful, beautiful sentiment and a great theme for the story, but try to remember it is a sentiment that is told, not shown. But what's really important is that this assertion is ultimately false, as this ideal doesn't make her any stronger than any of the other celestial mages shown in the series. In fact, she's been practically defeated, or at the very least, overwhelmed, by mages who consistently viewed spirits as tools. Now, let's be fair. Lucy does eventually improve. However, it never feels as substantial as it should be. See, the main example of her growth being shown is Lucy managing to take out opponents on her own. But these opponents are, well, they're mooks. You know, jobbers, minions, characters who are not going to get an entire page to describe who the heck they even are. While she's able to do all that, Natsu is just pretty much one-shotting gods in this story. So to be clear, one deuteragonist is capable of holding their own against practically every villain presented in the story, while the other handles smaller scale villains who'd be lucky to get official names or bios. Then there's Uraraka from Boku no Hero Academia. Her quirk is all about utility. Her gravity quirk requires her to be a little more methodical about how she uses it, or she can't hope to defeat any villain without putting herself in a serious risk at the start of the story. She mostly utilizes it to weaponize items by making them float as projectiles or be light enough to function as like a sword or a blunt object of some kind. She's very much a ranged DPS, a character who kinda has to keep her distance because she has little to no stamina and has to utilize items with range to be able to do any damage. In the earlier chapters and episodes, there's no distinct determination on her being a superior or inferior combatant. No one really says, "Hey Uraraka, you're strong," or "Hey Uraraka, you're weak." Though, as I just mentioned, they did clearly show her capabilities and the role she is best suited for as a hero. Then comes her fight with Bakugo, where she is pretty much forced to use nothing but strategy as Bakugo is significantly stronger than her, not just in physicality and quirk utilization, but in terms of adaptability and battle tactic. So, we have the story telling us of a strength disparity that Uraraka needs to address, which is why she's scared shitless at the idea of having to actually face him in the damn quarterfinals. Rightfully so. Because of that, Uraraka, as I said, had to plan to weaponize her environment, and surprisingly, that strategy almost worked. But again, strategy was never going to be the path to victory because, truth be told, strategy doesn't mean shit if you don't have the skills to back it up. So naturally, she loses, and this loss becomes a pivotal moment on her personal journey. Uraraka acknowledges that it was her lack of strength and skill that caused her to lose. Her strategy was seamless, but she had little other abilities to amplify the strength of that strategy. So, frustrated by her performance in the tournament, she laments her loss while speaking on the phone with her father and vows to do better. In the next arc, she makes an active decision to learn martial arts to make up for this inferiority, and you know what? Throughout the story, she manages to use it expertly. Uraraka is able to overcome many opponents with her strength and quirk utilization. So why the hell am I mentioning all this? Well, oh my goodness, would you look at that? You have a story about a character's strengths and weaknesses in battle, both told and shown. You then let the story about the facet of that character's abilities continue on, evolving with the overarching narrative. So, to recap, we have one female character who is lacking in strength. So we've got one character who the story tells us consistently is strong, but yet everything that's shown about her in combat proves otherwise. And then we have a character who is given a pretty balanced and rounded out concept of strength and weakness, and when their weakness is exposed to the audience, they have to work on fixing it. I don't need to tell any of you which is the good one and which is the bad one.
They're the same picture.
Okay, but that's later on though. Obviously, as far as the earlier renditions of Uraraka's character goes, Lucy's the weaker of the two. Her lack of strength is never addressed within the narrative, and while she improves, it's never significant enough to actually be of note. Her improvement at just being able to take out a bunch of nameless enemies or irrelevant characters is never going to measure up to, her fellow protagonist and main character, Natsu, who's taking out major antagonists. But the true problem is that nothing ever acknowledges the strength disparity. Everyone in the story tells the audience she's not weak, and there's nothing confirmed to be wrong with her being unable to do anything substantial on her own merits. Uraraka, on the other hand, is faced with limitations of her quirk, and the story acknowledges this as a very clear flaw. Because of this, she actively works to improve her fighting prowess and is given ample moments to show how this improvement has bettered not just her fighting chances, but her confidence. But now, a moment of silence for our queen. So, with a scale of great to garbage, where does Kairi fit into this? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious she's definitely Lucy, almost to a T if I'm being honest. The only difference is that Lucy actually does improve. Just, it's never really matters, or it's not substantial, better to say. I mean, at least by the end of the story, she could confidently take out a group of enemies like Natsu could at the beginning of Fairy Tail. Kairi never sees that kind of improvement. She's literally not capable of doing anything that Sora himself wasn't able to do at the beginning of the story. I mean, look at this. Her capability, her growth, is being shown by summoning her Keyblade in a different hand. Come the fuck on. She can be up a few Heartless here and there, but when it comes time for her to actually face a boss, or any character that isn't mindless, she's at a direct disadvantage, and barely manages to contribute in any meaningful way in such a scenario. Which, for comparison, Sora was able to do in the first game, with just as much experience as her, or actually less experience than her, because he was never trained. Ugh. Now, as I said, a lack of strength is not the issue in action-based media. The problem is not addressing the lack of strength. And just like with Lucy, that's a major problem for Kairi. She's not really effective in combat, despite being placed in combat scenarios repeatedly by characters of prominence, who are supposed to be the smart ones. So, she ends up doing little to nothing in these battles, and feels almost like the load. Now, there is a pretty common argument that I've encountered when discussing Kairi's utilization in combat. No, scratch that. It's the most common detraction to anyone's argument that Kairi is a useless or unnecessary character in the narrative, so let's address it. Kairi is not useless. She uses her Princess of Heart abilities in just about every game, and manages to save Sora and his pets in situations that are almost the end of the road. Well, you know, that seems like a solid rebuttal. She may not hold her own in a physical fight, but she saved the lives of our main crew a few times. That would be something if you weren't looking at this from a more critical standpoint, which is the whole point of this video. Yeah, let's shit all over this argument. Let's go. The main rebuttal to this rebuttal is actually pretty concise. Kairi's usefulness in these instances isn't due to actual development or established capability. It is the result of the writers writing themselves into a corner and needing a quick and easy way to pull the characters out of a death scenario. Because of this, these successes of Kairi's are unearned and hollow at best. Deus Ex Machina, worthy of disregard at worst. Let's talk about it. You all are familiar with the trope ass pulls, no? For the uninitiated, ass pulls are your quintessential plot contrivances that defy the necessary need for good writing and development. If something happened in a story that is never explained, foreshadowed, or developed, guess what? You're dealing with an ass pull. Y'all know how annoying this is. The writer laughs at your investment to detail and enjoyment of cohesion in storytelling. They taunt you for valuing developed power structures and world building, and naturally, you end up with a pissed off fan who is stuck between confusion and pure irritation. Anime is kinda notorious for this, especially shonen, and, you know, Kingdom Hearts has its fair share of these moments, but I don't think there's one that's more glaring than, you know, Kairi's Princess of Heart abilities. Don't believe me? Well, we're gonna answer 5 specific questions that typically get brought up whenever someone decides whether something is an ass pull or not. At least in regards to character abilities in the story. Let's go through. Question 1. What are the abilities? Kairi's unique skill is the Princess of Heart abilities. A Princess of Heart is, well, you know, Disney princess, but specifically, it means that you have a character who has a heart of pure light. A heart that darkness can never infect. Because of her status as a Princess of Heart, she can use a variety of skills that seem to be aimed at healing or restoring the heart. Question 2. How do they work? There goes the first issue when it comes to ass pulls. There's really no actual mechanics to how her abilities as a Princess of Heart work on a technical level. Whenever we see Kairi use her abilities, she just uses them. There's no concentrated effort. There's no development to how that works. It's just a thing that happens. This is kind of the key question that really defines whether or not you're working with an ass pull or not. Question 3. Are the abilities balanced? When I refer to balanced, I'm referring to whether or not the abilities have as many pros as they do cons. Are these abilities capable of doing good and bad? Are they restrained yet powerful, weak yet accessible? The biggies. And, we're voting with a big fat no, buddy. At least with what is defined from her abilities, the power to have a heart of pure light and use that to heal hearts. As of my writing this, there is no discernible negative to these skills. When she restores Sora's physical form and heart, there's no downside. She's not fatigued, Sora's body and heart have no defects, she just brings him back from a heartless state. And that trend persists, with other uses such as her helping Sora restart the timeline in Kingdom Hearts 3, and that moment is so ill-defined that I'm not going into detail. On a related note, I'd like to point out that Sora paid the price for using the power of waking, a unique skill in this situation. But when Kairi uses unique abilities, she's just fine. But I digress. The point is her powers are all boons, no banes. Question 4. Is this ability recurring? Has this ability popped up on multiple occasions throughout the narrative, or has it been featured once? This one is a bit of a yes, but no. A bit complicated because, some people would say, yeah, Kairi's used her powers multiple times, just in different situations. I, the troll that I am, would challenge that, as I don't think that's the case. And that's because, again, the mechanics are so loose that we don't really know how they work on a technical level. Because there's no definition on what Kairi's abilities are or how they work, it's hard to distinguish whether she is using similar or different means to achieve a goal. I have no idea if sensing darkness is a more advanced form of light manipulation or a different skill set altogether. I don't know if repairing Sora's heart is the same thing as restoring the heart of a timeline. And I'm just pulling those out of my ass. So, does Kairi use the same ability multiple times? Not likely. Okay, it just seems like the narrative portrays them as a one and done deal. If she did it once, you can't really expect her to do it again in the exact same manner, which would imply to you, that this is the same skill set. And you can't really expect any exposition to tell you, yes, this is the same ability, or no, this is something different. It may seem pedantic at first, whether or not a character uses one ability a couple of times, but it usually signals an ass pull because an ass pull doesn't exist on the merit of being an ability worthy of repetition. No, it's a writing choice, so by nature, these types of abilities don't feel it necessary to define themselves. Last question. Is there consistency? Is this ability consistent with the lore, world building, or mechanics that's been set forth? Well, there's our only yes on all of these questions. Kairi's abilities stem from her heart of pure light, and that connection does have a vague consistency to the many displays of her abilities. Abilities that other princesses of heart have used, such as resisting darkness. Though I'll point out, we've never seen her use this skill in the same way the princesses do, so make of that what you will. So, there's some consistency to be found in how Kairi uses her powers. So, let's tally up the score, y'all. 1 of 5. Yikes, yeah, that's an ass pull. Now that I'm certain her powers qualify as such, we gotta always round it out and ask, what is the problem? What's the big deal? Other than the problems listed about how they break the narrative, surely they don't ruin Kairi's overall character. Well, yeah, they do, because this is not just sloppy writing. This is intentional negation of the character's capabilities to the point where said capability has to be shoehorned into the narrative to even exist. Kairi cannot perform such stakes-destroying feats because she is capable. No, she's able to do this because the writing team has shit the bed. Since most of the character's powers are defined and structured, they have to rely on the character whose powers aren't. The one whose powers are essentially a blank slate. Which is, unfortunately, our young Princess of Heart. So these feats are not feats at all, they're plot contrivances, and we've already been over the inevitable reality of a character that exists for plot's sake. It demeans the character's importance in the story. Also, when the hell does she ever use these powers intentionally, or display a desire or intent to train them and use them again? Like, that just came to me as I'm writing the freaking script, and I cannot think of a single time where Kairi goes, I was able to save Sora that one time, maybe I can do that again. Or, I want to know how to do that. Yen Sid, can you teach me how to do that? Just saying. I digress. As such, Kairi's use of her Princess of Heart abilities can hardly be considered proof of a developed fighter with grounded potential. so she comes off as an easy deus ex machina to save characters when Nomora's out of ideas. So, we talked about basic physical prowess, and we talked about magical abilities. What the hell else is there to talk about with this girl?
This time, I'll fight.
Oh, right! The Keyblade! Duh. Okay, let's keep this simple and thorough. Kairi being given a Keyblade does nothing for her as a character or a combatant, as she never really progresses in skill level, never learns different abilities, and while it's cute to look at in the Remind DLC, nothing is really accomplished with her being a Keyblade user. Like, it's a big deal that Axel's a Keyblade user. They made a big deal of that. I don't think I can feel the same with Kairi. I swear, I have never understood why she kinda had one. Is it just because Riku and Sora have one?
It's still a mystery.
Let's wrap this shit up. As stated before, Kingdom Hearts is an action-adventure video game. Part of the story revolves around conflict and resolution of conflict through battle. These forms of conflict don't just, solve themselves, and are not minute in the narrative. So Kairi is done a disservice in not being able to properly contribute to these conflicts. This also ties in with the issue of her lack of conflict in the narrative. External conflicts such as battle can also develop personality, establish backgrounds, and give a character a sense of purpose going forward in the narrative. And as we've established over and over and over again, Kairi fell short. Her lack of power development and the lack of focus on these shortcomings deprive her of yet another meaningful vehicle for character development. It's another example of Kairi feeling less and less like a person that matters in this story. And naturally, that's no good when you're trying to make a person that the audience can either enjoy on a personal level through empathy, or enjoy viewing as a spectacle. But there's something even more sinister about Kairi's lack of battle relevance in the story. Something that we don't want to discuss, but kinda have to make this autopsy complete. You've heard me mention it a couple times, the concept of the load. A character who ultimately does nothing and contributes little to the accomplishments and tasks performed in the story. In fact, their contributions are so minimal that these characters often have to be sublimated with additional effort from other characters. These characters don't pull their weight. Other characters have to do it for them, and thus they are the load. Now, this trope is not inherently gendered. It's not something that is disproportionately done to one gender or another, like per se, the fridging trope. However, it's hard to ignore a female character that falls into the trope of being the load because it commonly ties into an array of other tropes that are typically gendered, like the damsel in distress. Hold on to your oversized shoes, buds, we must discuss everything, remember? Kairi is undoubtedly the load. And you don't just see it in the fact that she can't pull her weight in a battle. It's even worse than that. Many times she can't even keep herself safe, and as a result, others have to essentially look out for her. She's effectively a liability. Couple that with the lack of self-awareness on how much of a liability she is, and you have one of the following: a weak character that is not being treated as such, or a female character that is incapable of being anything other than annoyingly weak and dependent. Luckily, characters like Naminé, Aqua, Shion, and Larxene exist, or we'd be having an entirely different conversation. But I digress. Kairi has been done a major disservice when it comes to her portrayal as a fighter. These writing shortcomings have resulted in a character that will frustrate casual audiences who aren't aware or don't have a lot of experience with these kinds of issues in storytelling, or just straight up offend people who are genre savvy and have been down this long, weary road when this issue has been enacted in media over and over and over again. The point is, this is just bad storytelling for a character already lacking in proper development as is.
Swing and a miss.
At last, we reach the final characteristic: individuality. Now, let me explain. When I use the term individuality, I'm not talking about whether or not a character is unique or not. When I refer to individuality, I'm talking about the unique and distinctive mark a character leaves on audiences. And that can only truly be measured through meta-context. That's right, the fans are really the barometer of how unique a character is, as they're the ones that exemplify the character's lasting impact. Not every character has to be unique to the degree of being distinguishable from other characters, but the mark they leave on audiences, casual or critical, is distinct. And, yeah, you've been watching the last, 2 hours of this video? You already know she fails on this front. But even worse, she fails with her own creator. Let's get into it. Fan reception is mixed, to say the least. At best, fans of the character like her for being inoffensive and sweet. After all, she's got no negative qualities. Most players are ambivalent to her, either because they acknowledge her disappointing writing, or she fails to appeal to them on a deep level. And some fans actively dislike her for being, bland, or just they cannot stand her writing. Now, I do acknowledge that sometimes character perception among the masses can, and arguably should, be contentious, as it can indicate a character that is well written. For instance, characters like Edelgard von Fressfelg from Fire Emblem Three Houses or Akechi Goro from Persona 5. These characters can create quite the contentious discussions. Starters of internet flame wars they may be, not a soul will argue they're poorly written. The writers clearly wanted them to be complex and generate conversations. But Kairi's mixed reception isn't an intentional character design choice, it's an accidental one that is based more on whether the character has character, and not whether the character is likable or morally understandable. But I digress. Her popularity is something. I kinda want to describe it as minuscule, mainly because of things like her reception in Japan. In a recent poll in 2017, yes, 2017 is still recent, y'all, Kairi ranked 3rd amongst all female characters, placing her in 6th place on an overall list of the popular characters at the time. Objectively speaking, you could say that's pretty good for a character with little to no development. But you know me, the cynic. I'm gonna be honest. I find it pretty bad that the main female protagonist with plenty of potential storylines is middling in popularity in a country notorious for liking characters simply on aesthetic. And no, I'm not trying to talk Japan. Personally speaking, character design and aesthetic is a major component to character memorability. But that's not the point I'm making. What I am pointing out is that there is certainly something strange about an aesthetically pleasing character such as Kairi, barely outranking minor characters that are only prominent in maybe one game in a country that has been shown to love characters of her ilk. On the topic of minor characters, I feel it necessary to point out that she ranks below Aqua and Shion. I can't say that this is really bad. After all, Aqua is an incredibly prominent figure in the series, despite at that point only being in like 1 or 2 games, and she plays a major role in the lore and backstories of others. But then there's Shion. If I can go on a tangent for a quick minute, the girl barely has any screen time outside of one game. How the hell did this happen? Kairi's best friends with the main protagonists and has been around since day 1, but she can't beat out Mom Friend and Redacted over here? When you look at it that way, it's hard to argue against her popularity being pretty minuscule, all things considered. In fact, I would be remiss not to mention different internet tales that highlight Kairi's lackluster merch sales in Japan. Like, follow me on this journey because this is gonna seem a little random and, again, pedantic, but we're trying to highlight some things, so let's just follow me on this tale. In 2019, I spotted a post that expressed surprise about Kairi's merchandise. Specifically, that none of her keychains had been selling in Ikebukuro Animate. Granted, that's pretty inconsequential. A single convention having an unsold amount of specific merch at the end of the convention. But, for a reminder, this was Kingdom Hearts 3's release year. You'd think Kingdom Hearts items of all shapes and sizes would be selling like hotcakes, especially if there isn't an active hate base for that character. But no, apparently it didn't sell even on the last day. Yes, I know, this is conjectural, but I thought it worth noting when discussing a character's potential popularity in another country. As far as critical discussion of Kairi goes from the fandom in Japan, discourse is limited yet acknowledged. There were several fans in Japan that highlighted their love or problems with Kairi, but genuinely, the sentiment was she's inoffensive. However, I did note that Kingdom Hearts 3 may have changed some things. According to many posts from Japanese fans, there was a pretty vocal backlash to Kairi's characterization in Kingdom Hearts 3. Many fans, especially women, were completely annoyed by the fact that the character was once again underutilized and misused, with fans noting that this should have been the game that really let Kairi stand out and stand on her own. Now, this has never been confirmed by anyone who worked on the game, but a popular fan theory amongst players is that the reason why she was even allowed to be playable in the Remind DLC might have been a response to this discourse. And I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a theory I ascribe to personally. And I mostly think that because, in most cases, anytime we get re-releases or DLC, usually the point is to try to fix the small things. In this case, it was to try to fix the difficulty and continuity. Kind of slots in that you would try to give Kairi a moment to shine, and what better than to make her playable so you don't have to actually write her better. We'll get to the Remind DLC in detail when we circle back for our thesis, but for now, know that it was like putting gum on a broken pipe. All in all, reception of Kairi in Japanese fandom tends to be neutral at best. There's no overwhelming dislike or approval. Kairi just exists and is ultimately overshadowed by the multitude of better characters. The West is a little more obvious, yet divisive. Most fans are ambivalent to Kairi, primarily due to her lack of plot relevance or a dislike of her lackluster writing. Now, there are people that like her. Stating otherwise would be disingenuous. And look, I'm never going to tell you that Kairi is liked by some people for no reason. That's just bullshit. Her appeal is very obvious. She can't piss you off. She's sweet, petite, and wants Sora's meat. For some fans, that's enough to make a character enjoyable. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I have no problem.
However, in a broader sense, I find that most fans find that her positive nature is not enough, especially in an era where people are demanding more from the media. The Western fandom is largely frustrated with the character writing, and Kingdom Hearts 3 only seemed to exacerbate things, highlighting every issue we've already discussed thus far. Fervent hatred is also not uncommon in the fandom, some rational, some irrational. As far as popularity polls go, she rarely appears on rankings, but if she does rank, she's averaging a 9th placement. Personal experience, whenever I go to conventions, her merchandise can sometimes just straight up not exist. Again, could be that people are buying them and I'm just not getting to them in time, but it's crazy that I can find Zigbar and Zalden merch, but Kairi will just straight up not be there. Baffling. Now, all this discussion of popularity ties into that distinct impact I discussed. Based on what we've seen, it's not far-fetched to call Kairi a controversial character, as there is literally no consensus on how to view her as a person and how to view her as a character. Some people like her character, but hate her writing. Some hate her character, but are fine with the writing. Some think she's okay and don't get the hate. Some think she's mid and are aboard the hate train. It's a mixed bag, and again, that's not to say a controversial character can't have that unique impression amongst fans. The problem is really the lack of consistency in opinion. Specifically, that lack of consistency being due to bad writing. To bring up Three Houses again, even in the most heated of discussions, people can agree on Edelgard's motivations. At least from the perspective of, she has noble intentions in wanting to establish a meritocracy and lay waste to the more disastrous social norms in Fodlan. So, there's some commonality to be found in that conversation. You don't really get that in discussions of Kairi. At best, people can see that she deserves better, but,
I hate the way that you walk, the way that you talk, I hate the way that you dress. Some shit just cringeworthy, ain't even gotta be deep, I guess.
Okay, maybe they don't all agree that she deserves better. But you see my point, right? This is why I can't find Kairi merch. All this inconsistency in opinion, with no commonality, has completely tanked her popularity. She can't leave an impact on audiences. She can't have that individuality. But, back on topic. The difference that also distinguishes the controversy regarding Kairi's character from the controversy regarding other characters: intent. See, Edelgard, Akechi, Vriska, Snape, all of their controversial characterizations and reception is the result of a writer that wanted a character that couldn't be viewed through one singular lens. They are supposed to be analyzed and interpreted differently based on each audience member's personal views, morals, and empathy. The rich cornucopia of Kairi takes is not intended. In fact, it's likely that Nomura doesn't even have that much of an interest in her. And on that topic, oh boy, I've been wanting to talk about this for a hot minute. Let's discuss the mastermind of it all. It almost feels as if Nomura has a complicated relationship with Kairi. In the same breath that he tells you that he really wants Kairi to have a game to herself and that she was the perfect protagonist for that story, he also, in that same breath, diminishes her in the very same game, not even allowing her to take an active role in that game. After all, Melody of Memories is mostly a clip show game meant to recap the story thus far. We do get a couple of cutscenes that are unique, but I've already been over the ones where Kairi's at her most prominent and how those fail on every conceivable level. With instances like this, it's not really far-fetched to ask the question of whether Nomura actively dislikes the character. And trust me, I'm not the first fan of the series to ask the question. It's actually a pretty popular talking point, especially on the forums. Now, personally, I think it's presumptuous to assume that Nomura has any hostility towards the character. After all, she is the first female heroine he was ever able to create. However, I think we can infer one thing that isn't far-fetched or presumptive. Based on his storytelling and interviews regarding her character, he doesn't really desire to acknowledge her, or, better to say, Nomura just doesn't have a deep interest in Kairi. Or rather, he doesn't have as deep an interest in Kairi as the players and fans do. Yeah, we've already discussed how Nomura's storytelling does Kairi a disservice, so it's best to now hear it from the horse's mouth. When being interviewed, how does Nomura describe Kairi, and can we read between the lines in how he feels about her? I alluded to it earlier. The best example would be to look at Melody of Memories and the interviews that came before the game's release. The first thing that struck me was how Kairi ended up as the protagonist, or the main protagonist, of Melody of Memories. See, initially, according to Nomura, it was going to be Chirithy that acted as the main narrator for the game. However, during development, Nomura thought Kairi would be the better choice since she had been the character that experienced much of the events of the franchise. That seems like a pretty solid reason. After all, Chirithy doesn't really service the narrative until the mobile games. Once the decision was made to make Kairi the main protagonist, naturally a few things needed to be altered, and the story needed to be expanded. Considering this rhythm game mostly consists of recap of the story thus far, players could probably already tell which scenes were added later in development and which ones were planned from the get-go. Now, once you hear all that, you probably think, okay, that's good. He finally realizes that Kairi deserved more content. She deserved to be treated as a main character. What? Yeah, well, not so much. Remember, Nomura did not add Kairi as the main protagonist because he thought that she needed more development. He didn't think that she was lacking in terms of story progression or character development. No, he simply thought that she might make a better narrator than Chirithy, and trust me, that shows. As I mentioned before, the additional scenes of content relating to Kairi, such as the reveal of how Xehanort played a role in her ending up on Destiny Island, those scenes do not serve Kairi as a character. These scenes exist to fill plot holes and answer questions that have plagued the community for decades. Essentially, they exist to flesh out the timeline of events, and when you see it from that perspective, it explains why these scenes have little input from the main character of the game, and why they have little effect on her and her journey going forward. I feel like that's the best example of what's wrong, at least on Nomura's part. It may not be him actively stating, I don't care for the character, or I have no vested interest in giving her substantive characterization. But it does show that whenever he thinks to make Kairi important to a story or video game, it's not often done with the right intent. Sometimes it's just done on a whim with an interest in story cohesion. And speaking of story cohesion, why was it a better option for Kairi to be the narrator for a KH recap? She's technically not important or even present in the major events that were supposed to point to Sora's whereabouts, yet she recalls these storylines in full. I'm not going to say this is a major problem or anything. I'm just curious how Nomura realized Chirithy would be a weird choice of narrator, but not Kairi. Meh. So, I'm going to mention a little something that I'll emphasize can be taken with a grain of salt, since I cannot find a source on this. I've looked everywhere. But here it is. I recall a couple of people on various forums saying that Nomura, in another interview about Melody of Memories, said that he honestly felt it was kind of weird to pick her to be important in the narrative again. Now, again, not gonna really dive deep into this one, primarily because I don't have a primary source for this interview. But if it's true, well, you know, blah blah blah, Nomura is hesitant to develop Kairi, blah blah blah, that's not good, blah blah blah, she'll never get better, blah blah blah, you get the point. Alright, now this next point will require you to follow me, because again, it's one of those stretchy points. But I swear it'll tie into a bigger point. So, during my research, I actually noticed a weird discrepancy in that there were not a lot of interviews that specifically talk about Kairi in general. I found many that discussed Aqua, Roxas, Axel, Terra, and a multitude of other characters in many different interviews over the last couple decades. But I couldn't find many that focused on her outside of Melody of Memories. And when I say focus, I mean interviews that specifically have questionnaires pertaining to specific characters. I'll use an inconsequential one that's not really using a lot of different characters, but kind of proves my point. Let's use the interview regarding the 20th anniversary. So the Q&A was pretty standard, with a multitude of serious and fun questions about plots and characters. Of interest is probably the variety of names I saw in the transcripts. Fans asked about a lot of characters, from like Naminé to Ephemer to Demix, and Nomura typically had answers for all these questions about characters, and even used other characters' consistency in a way that I think really highlighted how extensive the lore could be. But there was only one character I noticed who barely came up: Kairi. Fans didn't ask any questions about her, except for where the hell Riku got her Keyblade from. And Nomura couldn't even work up an answer for that. Actually, I don't think Nomura was even able to work her into any questions, or lore or otherwise. Now, I know the instinct is to discard this, to just see this as an example of how Japanese fans don't have the strongest interest in Kairi. But if Nomura thought she was as important to the story or the world building as some fans wish she were, it wouldn't have been particularly difficult to work her into some questions. Like, seriously, ignoring the fact that he still doesn't have an answer or story crafted for Kairi's Keyblade, even I could come up with random fun facts that could have worked for her in a multitude of questions. Like, okay, someone asked why Riku cut his hair. Why not say it was a bonding moment between him and Kairi? Like, maybe she cut it short because that's the way she remembered his hair. And you could have been a great tie-in for her reluctance towards change. Hell, you could add more to that in Kingdom Hearts 3 by saying she herself would cut her own hair in a form of solidarity with one of her best friends. And I'm just coming up with that off the top of my head. There's probably better answers than that. Or like, someone asked how Ansem the Wise and Naminé knew each other. Well, throw in Kairi in there. Say that they know each other because of Kairi. There are so many options. But 'tis not to be. Kairi just never gets a lot of attention from Nomura despite being one of his original characters. Original character that feels staged to be a part of the main collective, mind you. I hope you see why we took this tangent. Nomura always feels like he has investment in a variety of his original characters, but Kairi always feels like the exception. Couple that with the reluctance to embrace her as a main character worthy of story time and good characterization, and you can paint a pretty fun picture of a creator whose disinterest in the character seems almost deliberate. Again, I'm not arguing anything as far as Nomura's true feelings. I simply say that if you want to analyze the content of his own words and actions, you can definitely gander a generalization which bodes poorly for Kairi's future. So, what does this all mean? Well, to sum it up, Kairi's popularity is subpar. Fans can't agree on whether to like or dislike her character or her writing, and that seems to be the natural result of a creator that seems just a little disinterested in developing his own creation. And so, we're left with a character with no individuality, no distinct mark on audiences despite having boundless potential to do so. And, as I said, the best characters ever constructed will leave some mark on every person who views that character. The cusp of greatness. Denied. Damn shame. Damn shame. It took us 2 hours, but we arrive at our thesis question. Through the lens of good characterization, has Kairi been a good character? If so, can she be better? If not, could future installments improve her? The answer, with meta and inverse context, is just a big, old, massive no. In universe, Kairi is completely underdeveloped in all conceivable ways from personality to battle prowess. Meanwhile, the multitude of characters that surround her have been developed beautifully. As a result, each of them have endless potential for where their stories can believably go and develop after the Xehanort saga. In layman terms, the good characters have a solid foundation ripe for further enhancement. Unfortunately, this Princess of Heart has no foundation, and the likelihood of salvaging it is non-existent. To supplement our analysis, she lacks any significant characterization in her personality and backstory, which has left her with no potential conflict or narrative stakes, and the fandom at large seems indifferent to her at best, frustrated and disillusioned at worst. But is there any hope for a better character? Could the games leading up to and including Kingdom Hearts 4 see an improved Kairi? Based on Nomura's few discussions regarding her and his storytelling thus far, it's unlikely that anyone will ever work to fix her. To be honest, I kinda want to say she's... There's a lack of motivation from Nomura, as evidenced by his latest attempt to give her relevance via Melody of Memories, and it feels like they don't really know what to do to make Kairi a better character. Uh-oh, it's another editor note. Okay, let this be a lesson to you all not to, like, craft a video over the course of, like, 2 years, 3 years. So, in 2024, a few articles came out about Nomura expressing some interest in retirement after potentially completing Sora's story. How important is this? How likely is it? It's all speculatory, but, you know, it's been put out there. So, articles got me thinking. If Nomura remains the director, you know, we got a pretty good answer over whether or not Kairi will be improved or not. But if another director graces the franchise, what then? Well, to truly show how extensive I want this video to be, I'm going to add in an addendum to answer the question. Can a new director improve Kairi? Short answer, slightly less unlikely than Nomura. Long answer, slightly less unlikely than Nomura, cynicism aside. I got about 2 reasons in-universe and meta. As far as in-universe goes, Kairi still has much of the baggage she began with, and it would take a highly dedicated director that believes Kairi has a lot to offer to the franchise to really flesh her out and recontextualize a lot of those writing flubs. On the other hand, as far as the meta goes, in my experience, it's rare for a new gaming director to mark a serious demarcation in the game's original philosophy. The only time I see, like, the big changes, like, it's usually executive meddling. In this scenario, since it's a voluntary retirement, Nomura will be a part of the process to elect his successor, and that means whoever is selected is going to be vetted to confirm that their vision aligns with his own. Since his vision doesn't really care for Kairi to begin with, not very likely he'll nominate someone who would. You know, I love giving examples, but quick example could be like Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal. For those who don't know, those have 2 different directors, and that was a voluntary director change with the franchise. There's yet to be a massive change to the Persona formula or writing that implicates new director Wada or Ito have a willingness to veer from their former director Hashino's tendencies, you know, for better or worse. So yeah, unless there's an overhaul of the writing team, Kairi remains at the bottom tier. So let's get back to the show, shall we? Let me give you the long-awaited example. Some of y'all have already known where I'm going with this. Kingdom Hearts 3 was probably the boiling point for a lot of the issues with Kairi's characterization. Fans on all aisles were very vocal about the issues with her execution in the story and how they felt disappointed that once again she had been sidelined and ultimately failed to live up to any expectations set by previous installments. After all, they'd been foreshadowing her growing to be a competent fighter for several games. But what do you get in the end? Lackluster character interactions with anyone not named Lee, laughable ineptitude in combat, and literally being killed to serve as motivation for Sora. Fans took notice and were very vocal about the issues with her. Even Japanese fans apparently noted that Kairi had been done as a service in 3. Naturally, Remind came out, and as is Kingdom Hearts tradition, it is DLC meant to address critique and remedy it, whether it be gameplay or story. Now, what did the team think would be a good idea to fix all of the issues and complaints lobbied at Kairi? Why to make her playable for a battle and give her some extra scenes with Sora? Now, your mindset may vary, but for me, these are only skin-deep issues with the character. And if you've been paying attention to this behemoth of an analysis, you'll know that Kairi's issues go so much deeper than just being playable in a fight and having more shipping moments with Sora. You know, this video's wrapping up, so I think we need another lightning round on every way Remind fucked up Kairi, or didn't fix Kairi. So, let's do it. Lightning round! Number 1. There are no alterations to pre-existing scenes, so issues such as her being fridged or failing to defend herself on a basic level in cutscenes, that's still there. Number 2. While her moveset is impressive and has a little personality to it, there are some, interesting aspects. Number 3, added scenes such as her meager attempts to fight Saix and Xemnas still have her being the load, as she's quickly incapacitated to allow for the plot to continue as it's supposed to. Number 4, cute Sokai scenes does not a character make. The last thing Kairi needed was more moments with Sora of all people. You couldn't give her some time with Riku, for fuck's sake? Number 5, her relationship with Sora is compared to Ventus and Chirithy's relationship. Gotta admit, I don't mind the comparison, but it seems weird if Nomura has any intentions of making Sokai canon. Like, can y'all imagine the Venex Chirith? Number 6, Kairi still remains a passive force in this narrative, but not, again, intentionally. The ultimate example being her sleeping by the end of the story. An action that is given little content in terms of characterization, like, is this her decision? What motivated that decision besides the obvious? How does she feel about making a decision like this? We'll never know. Number 7, to add to number 1, still no defining of her internal or external conflicts during the game, or outlining them for future installments. She remains aimless beyond the desires of the plot. Number 8, Sora and Kairi's interactions remain hollow, feeling more like plot progressive dialogue rather than two longtime friends bonding with the obligatory romantic coding. Number 9, Kairi receives no progression with any other relationships, established or otherwise. Number 10, still no prominent personality on display beyond nice anime girl. No exploration of weaknesses and strengths for her to accept or reject in this game or future games. Her character isn't shining in this DLC. Naturally, Remind's handling of Kairi remains a your mindset may vary kind of situation for the fandom, with some arguing it fixed every grievance they have with Kairi, while others argued it didn't fix it. The prevailing opinion being, it was nice to give her some focus, but, you know, there could be more done. I personally think a lot of this shit was cosmetic. They failed to fix the deep characterization issues that plague her character. Now, why did I save Remind for last? Well, because I feel like it serves as definitive evidence to answer the second part of my thesis. Can Kairi be improved? This is the proof we need when it comes to whether the writers are equipped to make Kairi a better character. When faced with critique on how they handled her, their best solution was to essentially just make her playable and give her more scenes. But all of this is just lacking in substance.
You can stand to zazz it up a little bit more.
No offense, Chris Kirk, but I gotta say, this whole thing, it lacks zazz.
What do you suspect will happen in the future installments when Nomura is asked to improve Kairi for Kingdom Hearts 4? It'll likely just be to make her present at certain events. Yay! It's kinda ridiculous to see this for the character. After all, I have to keep reiterating this. Kairi isn't just a side character that doesn't have any prominence or prevalence, and thus doesn't have a purpose. She is one of the original 3 characters introduced in the first hour of the game. She's part of the main trio. She should have been one of the best characters offered in this story. But she just isn't. And there's no indication that there's a desire to make her a better character, or even an understanding on what would make her a better character. It's tragic. And unfortunately, not uncommon. So many writers, especially male writers, express a difficulty when it comes to writing women. But, in truth, there's nothing about the world of Kingdom Hearts that should suggest writing women should be any different than writing the men. But this is a discussion point for another day. I could probably make a whole video on this kind of thing, but just know, not a good excuse. The gender is the reason I'm having a hard time writing the character. But beyond Nomura's disinterest and the failure to address key issues with Kairi, there must be more, right? There's got to be a better explanation for why I think Kairi's not going to be any better going forward. Well, I propose one question to further the argument. Where does Kairi go from here, narratively speaking? The easiest answer is she'll feel guilty about being a factor in Sora's disappearance, or death, I'm not sure if he's dead or not, and want to save him, right? Remember, this is the character that barely has any tangible reactions to the multitude of major life events she's faced. Why the f*** would she start now? Hell, Melody of Memories proves my point tenfold. We don't get any thoughts or feelings from Kairi regarding Sora beyond the flashbacks. She's a bit depressed about not getting to go with Riku, but that felt less like her character emoting and more like the writer signaling to the audience that her prince is in another castle and she's not going along for this journey. It's strange, because I can at least say that the Final Fantasy cast expresses some emotional response to Sora's death, and I can even see their intent to do something about it to save this poor helpless cinnamon roll. That lack of realism strikes again. There's just not much one can do with a character that fails to interact with external stimulus in a significant way. It's like letting an NPC be the main character without any tweaks. But TG, you might say. Melody of Memory sets Kairi up to become a competent Keyblade wielder since she'll be trained by Aqua.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, another point brought to the table is Kairi training with Aqua, which sounds awesome and could rectify one issue. You know, her lack of skill progression despite being a Keyblade wielder for several games. That is until you remembered we've done this song and dance already. Remember folks, Kairi was established to be training since Dream Drop Distance, and how'd that work out for her? Beyond the Remind DLC making her playable, she showed no true battle prowess throughout Kingdom Hearts 3. Which, when you think about it, is insane, considering the main hero barely has any damn training before taking down Ansem in the first game. We've been told so many times that Kairi was going to train and be capable for years. And even in the big climax, she has nothing to show for it. You know, is it really likely that Aqua can put her on the same level as her best friend or even the Days trio at this point? If I can impart a message, it's this. Characters should not be beholden to a plot. The plot should be beholden to the characters. Characters should not rely on the plot. Plot should rely on the characters. So, let's wrap this up, shall we? Kairi, the Princess of Heart, best friend to Sora and Riku, main triagonist. Kairi is a fundamentally broken character. All facets of good characterization have eluded her over the past 20 years of Kingdom Hearts, and all signs point to her character struggling to get good development due to the writing's inability to address and remedy her flawed writing, or an overall disinterest in her character as a whole. The years have not been kind to this damsel in distress, and unfortunately, I don't think they'll improve for her. But I suppose we can take solace in the limitless potential of fanfiction, fan art, theory videos, and, of course, the manga. I'm Tomboy Gamer XL, and let's zip up the bag on Kairi of Kingdom Hearts.